Good morning and good afternoon, and welcome to the final day of this Hacking HR Culture Summit. And this morning, we're here to talk about leading organizational transformation, enabling HR as a catalyst to change while we're all navigating transformation with confidence. And today, there's not an organization that we're talking to that isn't undergoing change, with changes in technology, in economic landscapes, in geopolitical, and also in the generational experience. And so today we're going to talk with our panelists on how they're doing this with confidence and with really strategic thinking. So welcome to the panelists today. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Good morning. Good afternoon.
Hello.
Hello. It's so good to see your faces. I have to say, when Enrique and I spoke about the conference, that this was the panel I was most excited about to moderate. And so what I'd love to do, since we have so much to talk about, is have you all introduce yourself, who you are, where you are on the planet today. And wow, there's just a little bit of turbulence there. There we go. And your role. And I'd love to ask you just the first question with your introduction, which is going to be, how do you balance as a leader both organizational transformation and the resilience and well-being of the employees? And I'll start with Vidya.
Okay, so hi everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone who have joined this session. So thank you so much, Chair, for starting with me. So probably to introduce me, as you all know, I'm Srividya. I'm from India. In fact, to be very specific, I'm from Chennai, which is the southern part of India. So I work for a company called Petrus Technologies, and we are into industrial IoT. So that briefs the introduction about me. And to answer to your question, to just jump into your question, like how do how do we balance the organizational, like change and the well-being, right? I think that is the in topic starting from COVID. I think resilience, the term resilience or change or everything, and the dynamic thing started from COVID. To be very honest, I think all like by default, if you are part of an HR function, right, you must be always gearing up for any changes for that matter, even if otherwise it's not an organizational transformation, right? So how do we look at it is. As in HR, what we always do is we have a frequent connect with our employees, to even understand how do they do, which is a basic courteous thing that we do with all the employees. And having a situation where it is not so comfortable for an associate to manage change, I think it becomes more important for us to have a frequent employee connect, create a space for them to be more vocal, more open, and and address their critical issues, be it physical or mental well-being. We do a lot of such programs for them so that they understand that change is the new norm, and it is important for us to be abreast and be relevant to what's happening in the market and manage it. So I think that strength is something that HR should reassure our employees time and again, which makes it easy for any organization to face any kind of changes that they will have to make. So this is what is my perspective about this.
Thanks, Vidya. I'll go to who's next to me on the screen. Marco.
Hi, everyone. It's good afternoon here in Portugal, and happy to be here with you. So I'm Marco, and I lead people in spaces for Galp. Is a Portuguese energy company. We're headquartered here in Lisbon, and we have operations in Latin America, in Europe, and in Africa. So, I mean, going to the question, I think that's an interesting one. So, how do you manage to, stay on top of what's going on in the organization in terms of we do our pulse surveys and those kind of things as well, trying to understand what people are thinking about how the organization is doing. I think it's very important to be on top of that and really understanding the pulse of the organization. But at the same time, you have a transformational agenda to drive and to push forward. So it's a challenging balance, and keeping everybody engaged at the same time when you need to change and drive that change. So I think you need to have a good plan for that. You need to communicate constantly with your people, but you also need to have a clear vision to share with them and manage to balance the feedback they give you with what you want to really achieve as an organization. So it's not easy to strike that balance. Obviously, it's more difficult than I just outlined, but for me, that's kind of a little bit of what you can do.
Thank you so much, Marco. I know it's so funny that I feel like we have this conversation all the time, and each time we bring something different to it. Angela.
Hello, everyone. My name is Angela Briggs Page. I am the Chief People Officer for Acelero. And I'm excited to be here and engage in this conversation with you. But when I think about change and I think about well-being, I think about the fear people have with change. And I think about why people resist change. So I think people have a negative impact to change, and it impacts their well-being negatively when they feel like it's happening to them instead of with them. The key, I think, is transparency, communicating the why, addressing the fear head on, and making employees feel like they're part of the journey instead of just the audience. And I also think that leaders really help set that tone for how that change is received. And so you really have to work on investing in equipping your leaders to model adaptability, listen to concerns. They have to be listening to their employees, and they have to be able to guide their teams through this uncertainty. So when employees see leaders fully engaged, it really does help build that trust and help alleviate some of that fear, which impacts their well-being.
Angela, thank you so much. I'm so glad you made it real for all of us instead of just really talking about strategy. So I appreciate that. Sergey, where would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Sergey, and I'm talent management consultant. I also teach at IE Business School and Porto Business School. I see Marco, my neighbor here. I'm based in Madrid, Spain, and thinking about change and leading change. One thing that has always been important to me is to signal safety, because during the turbulence, many people don't know what's going to happen, and when they don't know, as Angela said, there is this sense of fear. So I remember signaling to my team during COVID, say, hey, you know what? Whatever happens for the next 90 days, you won't lose your job. And repeating that and say, you know what, you have so much stuff going on that you need to worry about, your loved ones and personal life. Don't worry about your paycheck. And that creates an enormous amount of psychological safety. So balancing this organizational element and personal element is crucial, because every single individual must know that they're able to cope with change, that they know what's going to happen, and that they want to. So balancing those three, because I think that organizations, we over-index on the knowledge. It's like, okay, this is going on, that's going on, that's going to happen. But they also need to want to. So building this vision and making sense of what's going on is critical.
Thank you, Sergey. And Burjat, do you want to introduce yourself and answer the question?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Burjat White. I'm based in Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm head of HR for the Americas in the Adecco Group. It's a global workforce and talent solutions organization. We're based globally in Switzerland, and our U.S. team is dispersed throughout the U.S., and we have North America as well as LATAM business. So this question, and Cher, I love when you started, because you said change is the state of any business. I don't know any business today that is in a steady state. And that is simply because there's so many changes happening around us. And in my organization, or any organization, I would say what I like to focus on is helping to paint a picture for employees. What is the change that we're going through? where can they see and experience themselves in the end? So painting the picture for the journey of what's to come, but also what is the light at the end of the tunnel. I think through that process, though, you also find employees who realize that that journey might not be for them. And that's okay. We don't want that to happen, but when it does happen, it's usually in the best outcome for both parties. And we want that to happen early in the journey if needed. And it allows us then for the team that remains to continue on in a very positive way. I also like to level set with my leaders to say, through the change journey, if you look at that against also engagement, you're not likely to see it continue to go up, and that's natural. There's a dip, so let's plan for the dip, but how do we shallow the dip? And that's really equipping the leaders and understanding what is top of mind for the employees. What do they think about as they're experiencing the change? What is important for them to know in order to move forward in a positive manner? And as a leader, are you prepared? Can you speak about the change? Can you paint the picture for the future? And can you also, in your toolbox, as Angela said, be equipped to work through the journey with them and understand the different emotions and different concerns, but address them transparently and head on so that we can quickly move through that curve. But there will be a dip, but how do we shallow the dip and move forward in an effective way for the business?
Thank you, Bridget. Here's the thing that I just loved about this conversation so far is that we have already started talking about the what. We all know what's going to happen. And each of you very eloquently talked about the how, which is why people are attending this conference online, is to get the how that we do this. And so, Marco, one of the things I really wanted to ask you is that, like, how do we help HR leaders make strategic decisions rather than reactive decisions while all this change is going on? And then we'll have other people kind of jump in.
Thanks for the question, Chair. I think first, you need to really be clear on what you're trying to achieve, right? So what is your North Star? What is the future state that you're trying to get into? Because I think that helps you when you define where you want to be, and then you work backwards from there. And I think as HR professionals, we play a critical role in the organization in terms of facilitating and enabling that change, creating that sense of urgency or burning platform, and really defining where we want to be and why we are going to go through this journey. I think is absolutely critical. I believe much more in change leadership than in change management, because it all comes down to leaders. And I think we as HR professionals have a very important role, shaping the leaders of the organization. So I see a role for us there, not only in terms of, enabling that change through process and through frameworks that obviously will support creating a change narrative and all that comes with that, also shaping the leadership of the organization so they can be the real beacons of the transformation that you're going to achieve, and they can lead from the front. And I think that's where it sometimes breaks, where you're trying to achieve something as an organization, but there's no, common understanding of that need from the leadership layer, and that creates a lot of resistance, at all levels in the business. So I think that coalition is key, and I think HR plays definitely a critical role in enabling those leaders and driving that exercise.
That's so great. I love change leadership rather than change management. And so, Angela, when I look at your world, can you talk to us a little bit about, like, what are the capabilities and leaders that you're really helping your organization develop so that they can be change leaders rather than change managers?
Thank you. I think that's such an important question here, because I think that change is not just impacting employees, it's impacting leaders. Our leaders are fearful, right? They're overwhelmed, they're tired, right? They too are experiencing the same thing. Again, we have to understand that they are the direct line to our employees. So we have to make sure that we're equipping and enable them to be able to handle this, right? So it's important that our leadership first understands the why behind the changes that we're trying to implement, right? What's in it for them? What's in it for the organization? Right? So that they can understand what that means and being able to communicate that to their downlines, right? And more than anything, I think that we also need to help our leaders understand how to lead with vulnerability, and lead with authenticity, right? It's okay for leaders to say, I understand that there's a lot going on right now, but I want you to understand this is why we're making this change. And I want to also understand what your concerns are. I want to be able to listen. Leaders have to make employees feel seen, valued, and heard through this process so that they feel, again, that they're part of the solution, right? They don't want to feel like something's happening to them, something is happening with them. So how do we equip our leaders to understand that they're part of this journey, that they need to get the feedback, right? Talk about what can change, what can't change, and the why behind if we can't do something, but how do we make them active participants in the journey? And we also have to realize it's also okay to course correct. Leaders have to be okay with understanding that the plans may change, and this is the why behind it, right? So open communication, vulnerability, understanding that this is a culture of continuous improvement, so they will all be changing to make sure that number one, we're driving this forward, and then we're adaptable.
Got it. Thank you, Angela. You brought up one really great point around culture. So we've talked about how does the organization change? And then we're talking about how do we bring people along? And so, Sergey, I'm really interested in what are the how do we change the cultures during change? Or what do we need to bring in about culture to create a change?
That's a great question, Cheryl. Thank you. And I think that, the first thing that needs to be addressed is how we understand culture. A definition that's very common is how we do things around here. And many leaders, hearing this and adopting this definition, they try to change the behaviors and say, okay, so we need to drive more agility. We need to be more collaborative. We need to be more honest. So let's make people do those things. But I prefer the definition of culture as it's what makes people behave a certain way. Right? It's like this invisible wind that blows and it bends the trees. The trees bending, that's the behavior. That's what we do here. But we don't see the wind. Right? So the forces that make us behave in a certain way, to me, that is culture. So, which means that how people behave is the wrong question to ask. The right question to ask is what ecosystem we need to build in order for people to behave that way. And that's where we start thinking about the different components. So let's start with leadership. And, what are the core leadership competent or what responsibilities? Okay, you need to set the standard. You need to role model and you need to hold people accountable. Next, let's look at the structures. Let's look at the organization. Oh, you want to be more collaborative? Well, we need to remove the silos. We need to make the organization flatter. We need to, organize people around brands or services. Next, let's look at policy and process. I'm a huge believer in process. And I think that if we are able as HR to hardwire our cultural intent into the process, we're not needed. Yeah, it's a scary thought, but I hope that's the future. We need to look at talent, because the talent that we have for the culture change and the talent that we might have, and analyzing this gap, whether the people who are with us now are a good fit for the future organization, because not everyone will travel that journey together, and we need to treat people like adults in order to make sure that to put them in their agency position. We need to understand what are the tools and technologies and platforms that we'll be using to effectuate that change. And finally, what are we measuring? Because if you're not measuring, so what are metrics and KPIs to make sure that we're advancing in the right direction? So when we look at change management from the ecosystem perspective, so that's the culture that we want to create, which means that we need to be changing intentionally and comprehensively all the ecosystem elements, rather than primarily focusing on the employee and the employee behavior. If we know that up to 90% of all behavior is context dependent, so context is king, let's change the context and the behavior will follow.
I love that. I talk about culture. I'm an anthropologist. And so if we don't look at our behaviors, our processes, and our actions, we can't really see the wind through the trees. So I'm going to have this conversation. So great, the conversations going on with the virtual community, a lot about trust, about David Rock's SCARF model. And so since we have these pieces coming and we've been talking really wide, and so many of you are chief people officers and leading HR, I wonder if we could ask about real changes that you're taking your organizations through right now, and how, what are you coming up against and what are your solves? Because that's really what people are in the virtual community are going through. Vidya, I'm curious if you could share with us, a change that you guys are going through. I mean, everybody's going through something with AI at the moment. And like, what skills as an HR leader are you specifically using, or maybe even talk about the organizational transformation you're going through?
Sure. Well, probably I would like to touch upon a few skills that, broadly that HR should possess, who is handling any organization transformation. So one will be the strategic. I think that was already covered by Sergi in detail about the strategic skill that a person should possess. But if I have to just brief it out, basically an HR should be able to understand business more, because in today's context, right, staying relevant to the business knowledge is very important. So when we say strategic partner to the business, so I think for us to align the HR strategy to business strategy will become more essential skill for an HR. So second thing is future proofing your talent, either upskill your talent or reskill your talent, or ensure that they stay abreast of what's happening in the market. The third thing, in the same line of being strategic skill, will be the technical skills, right? The HR tech that plays a major role, I think. Not just AI, I think even much before, right, where we started working with SAP and Workday, and the small HRMS tool starts from there. I think today we are in a stage where we need to make predictive analysis of the future for our associates, be it on the their growth or the attrition, or to even understand what we can do next in the organization, so that we are abreast in the market and our go-to-market strategy is also on point. I think that these strategic skills is something that HR should possess. And beyond the strategic skills, I would say the people skills. When I say people, the literal people skills, right? Which means the communication, the storytelling, because people are interested to understand the larger picture when it comes to change management. They're not looking for what will happen to me next. While the fear of failure and everything is there in the initial phase, as we transform, I think people are interested and curious to know about the larger picture, what is in store for me, what I can do for the organization. I think the storytelling would help a lot, in the change transformation process. And I think someone rightly said about the leadership being groomed, trained, yes, with the skills so that they can handle their associates. I think in that role as well, HR skill as an organizational influencer makes a very, very larger impact, because we have a larger connect with the wider audience in the organization. So our communication with people, our connect with people, our influencing skills with people is going to be very, very beneficial in the transformation process. So I feel these are the skills, broadly will help us in creating the change that we are looking for in a larger platform. Thank you.
Thank you, Vidya. Burjat, when you think off of Vidya talking about the skills, can you share with us what are you coming up against, and what are you seeing as ways that we can move forward? Because everybody's experienced some type of transformation right now.
Absolutely. Cheryl, I'll answer that question. Also, your question on what are some of the changes we're facing. I think you'd given AI as an example to that. And that is a space that for us, then I'll speak as our organization, where our role is in talent solutions. And so the best thing about that is AI creates a unique opportunity for us internally to think also about how are we equipping our teams to work differently, to think differently, because that is how we then engage with our clients. The opportunities to think differently, to reskill the employee group on if this is the role that you had today, your role tomorrow might look a little different. But again, let's paint the picture of what that could be. And AI can be very scary. It's for a number of employees, and I would say that the broader population, there's a sense of the unknown, and with the unknown becomes fear. And so it's how we have worked to encourage curiosity and learning about what AI is, because that itself allows you to move along the change journey. It allows our employees to think differently about, if I reimagine what I could do differently with AI, it's taking my job, it's allowing me to do my job better, because it's taking away some of the things that I don't quite like doing, or things that are a little bit more monotonous. How do I help extrapolate that from my work and embrace the change journey so that my time spent is more valuable and something that I more enjoy doing, and can reskill into that space if it is something my job is even changing beyond my skill set today? How do we encourage the teams then to lean into that and learn what the new job could be? And so I say that because, again, change is scary. Change can be something that, if our leaders are not clear in articulating what that new future looks like, it's difficult to bring our employees along on the journey. So it's first equipping our leaders, and that was the stance we took. Let's start from the top down. First, to equip and understand, what does it mean for our organization? What does it mean for the role that we play in the broader society? And then how will we take that into our organization down to the deepest levels so they too can be a part of it? Whether it is their job changing or what they're selling to our clients differs because of the technology enhancements.
Thank you so much for, like, what you just said always makes me think of kind of the conversations I'm having all the time, which are around building trust, providing clarity, and helping people be adaptable and nimble. That seems to be kind of like the condensed organizational change for HR leaders right now. Marco, how are you dealing with change in your organization, and what are the best lessons that you can share with us?
So, I mean, being an energy company, obviously the energy transition itself represents a massive opportunity, but a challenge as well. So we not only have to change, some of the skills within the organization, so people are able to add value with new technologies and new energies, but as well as there's a mindset change that needs to happen. So I think some of the things were already mentioned here that we are, facing as well. Obviously, I mentioned the skills point. I think AI is a no-brainer for everybody. We're not so exposed on a day-to-day to it beyond, productivity. But on the business side, it's not an industry that has, the same exposure, let's say, as tech or any other ones. But it's important to us as well. But what I find more challenging is working on the mindset and the pace of change, because it's an industry that usually doesn't move very fast. But change is all around, so you have to equip people to be able to cope faster with change. You have to create that psychological safety that was mentioned here as well, which is absolutely key. So people need to trust the vision. They need to trust where the organization is going. We're going now through a change as well in terms of our purpose and values, which we are communicating across the organization. So, and I think that's a critical skill for any HR professional to be successful in such a context, is storytelling, and also being almost like a marketeer in terms of how you communicate that, how you reach people through the different channels and in different ways, because there's, different populations within the organization, different generations. So you need to be able to connect with them at an emotional level, not only at the rational level. So I think that's key for any HR professional. And also it's the data point, right? So being able to show progress, being able to be on top of your data, and creating these short-term wins, which are critical in any change process. That's something we're working on. So we're activated our new purpose. We're now activating each value individually and trying to have stories from people in the organization that live those values in their day-to-day life, and then bringing that into everyone's awareness, because I think that's what really strengthens the change and makes it real and takes it from the PowerPoint into what's happening every day in the organization. So that's a big focus for us right now. We moved into a new HQ 1 year ago. That also created a strong environment for change when you move people out of their physical environment. So we're working in a lot of those things and trying to keep everybody engaged and motivated, knowing that it's a journey, right? So, and it's about the destination, but the journey is as or much more important than the destination itself. So we have to take everybody along, and that's kind of what we're focusing on. And I believe those skills nowadays for any HR professional in going through this kind of situation, I think they're really key.
Oh my gosh, Marco, there were like 5 places we could have gone with everything that you just said. I am really curious. I'm watching the conversation. There's lots of conversation in our community about resiliency and building resilience and mindset. But there is really one great question I'd love to ask that Mohammed asked, which is from the panelists, is there experience that we can share around HR managing downsizing and layoffs, and like really what were the leadership capabilities and the actions that were supportive and helpful? And since I don't know everybody's organization, I can look by industry. Does anybody want to take that on for Mohammed?
I mean, I can continue. I would say, everything that I mentioned before, I think applies to that as well. It's, it's part of the change, right? And change happens at many levels within an organization, and there's always an element of, restructuring or new skilling or reskilling that organizations have to go through. But I think the fundamentals of change leadership are the same, right? You create a burning platform, you get people to understand why you're doing what you're doing. You create trust because you are able to tell a story about the future that is somehow engaging and motivating. And you need to respect that everybody goes through the change curve at their own pace. So you have to account for that. And then you need to, create these quick wins and continuously communicate to the organization how you're doing in that process, and what milestones you're hitting and how you're getting better in doing that. So I don't really think there's a secret, formula for it, but and obviously it's more difficult in the day-to-day when you're going through those kind of significant restructuring exercises. But I think these kind of fundamentals are something that you should apply to it as well. At least in my experience, that's kind of what I've done in different places.
Thanks, Marco. Sergey, I'm going to have you answer that as well really quickly. And then we just have a few minutes and I'm going to do a speed round. So, Sergey,
So no restructuring, no downsizing should go to waste. It's always an opportunity, right? We don't want to get there because we know that people who leave, you can bet on another 15% living voluntarily. So what you need to do, and what I've always been doing and how I work with my clients, that needs to be a talent play. And for that, you need to know absolutely the quality and quantity of the talent and the strategic intent that you're moving towards, which means, okay, how am I downsizing? Is it proportionally? Am I going to ring fence some people? And for that, I need to know whom I'm ring fencing. So the performance and talent data are critical. How I communicate, is there opportunity for talent arbitrage, and so on and so on and so forth. So just I always say, hey, it's an opportunity.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, speed round. I cannot believe this conversation ran this quickly. And I could have talked to you guys all day just about org transformation. And we only said AI once in the whole conversation, which has not happened in the whole conference. So I'm going to start with Burjat. And last comments on what do you do personally to remain resilient and adaptable through change? What can you share with people?
That's a great question. So for me, it's always being curious because, and we spoke about it earlier as well, that agility, knowing that there's always going to be a level of change, being comfortable in that discomfort is key. And it means having a level of understanding that things will happen around you, but what are things that are within your control? Focusing on that from a personal standpoint. And also I had this conversation with an old colleague yesterday that it was no one else can take your piece. You have to give it away. And so that's a choice, whether you give it away or not. And in that means the work will be there, the tough decisions, the hard moments, because change is hard. It will be there, but no one can take your peace. And finding the space for quiet and peace is so key.
Brilliant. I love that, Bridget. Thank you. Angela.
Same question?
Everybody, this is our final mic drop.
Perfect. For me, resilience comes from staying deeply connected to my purpose and the impact of the work that we do. HR is the heart of transformation in an organization, and that means we have to model adaptability before we ask it of others. So I stay grounded through continuous learning, whether it's industry trends, leadership insights, or just listening to the challenges our employees are facing. I also prioritize self-care and a strong support network, because leading transformation isn't just about driving change, it's about sustaining the energy to see it through.
Angela, I love that. Thank you. Vidya.
Okay, great. So I think probably I might sound a little yogic, but I would like to detox myself, because I think we ourselves are a normal human being. So whenever there's a change transformation which comes to our side, I think we are the one who is first going to get affected, the moment we hear, oh, another change, right? So I think I personally prefer to have a mental detox for myself and set my goals clear on what I will have to focus being as part of HR. So I have to create my own purpose first for me to even explain the purpose of the transformation to my larger audience. So that's one. And second thing is this is my motto. It's like fail fast and learn faster, because it's okay to make mistakes during the change transformation. But at the same time, it's very, very important for you to just roll up your sleeves, get back on the job, and just go with the momentum, because change itself is not something which is static. It is dynamic, and it is very important for us to actually first understand what the change is all about. Like Angela said, understanding the why is very important. And once you understand it, once you get the confidence, show confidence in the change while being realistic about the challenges. That's my motto, and that's how I push my change transformation in the organization. Yeah.
Thank you, Vidya. I love the detox piece. Marco.
So I was going to say three things. So for me is, it's the energy part as well. So managing my energy, working on my mental and physical, well-being and health. So you need to stay energized, because these transformations are challenging. So I think that's the first thing. And second thing, staying true to my personal purpose and the purpose of what we're trying to achieve and the value that it will bring into the organization. And third, it's really leading by example and qualifying every day. And I think that's what you can do to try to be successful in it.
Thanks, Marco. And Sergey.
I energize and re-energize through meaning. So one advice that I've stolen from a really great leader, but it served me well throughout the years. At night, before going to bed, I look in the mirror and I ask two questions. Have I learned something new? And have I made anyone smile? And if I answer yes to those questions, ready for another day.
Oh, I love that. Those were such great answers. I'm just going to share mine, because I work with so many different leaders in industries and across the globe, and definitely I think about it as restore, re-energize, and stay present. So really restoring there's different. I live in places with mountains, so I can hike up a mountain and feel accomplished and let everything go and then start fresh. So that's restore. Re-energize is a meaning for me, like why I do what I do. And I am anti-purpose, but just totally another conversation. And then I would say like the stay present is the biggest piece, is the ability to listen. Because I think that everybody says just be curious, but if we're not really listening, I think it's impossible to be completely curious. And so I've really appreciated being able to listen to your wisdom and spend time with you today. And I know that everybody in the community has really benefited from something now from our conversation. So thank you so much for being here. And the next conversation is coming up in just a minute. And I hope everybody has a great evening and day. Thank you so much.
Thank
Bye
you.
bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Welcome, everyone, to Hacking HR's People and Culture Strategy Summit. Today, we will be diving into the business case for well-being, integrating mental health into HR and business strategies. I'm Danielle LePage, Hacking HR's Chief Learning Officer, and I will be your moderator today. I'm joining Mexico. Let us know in the comments where you're tuning ahead with our expert panelists, and this session will run up to 40 minutes. Plus, all participants who stay until the very end will receive a Credly badge. So be sure to stick around to earn yours. Jessa, would you kindly bring our panelists to the stage? Welcome, everyone. How's it going today?
Good. Hello.
Nice to see you all. Before we get started off, why don't we go around the room and introduce who you are, what you do, and why you love this topic. Rita, do you want to start off?
Yes, sure. So I'm Rita. I'm based in Portugal working with Nokia. I'm a people head for a particular business unit. So driving all the HR strategy there. And I'm passionate about well-being. Well, my background, I'm a psychologist, so this is something that definitely it's close to my heart.
Wonderful. We're lucky to have you here, Rita. Thank you. Over to Dahlia.
Yes, hello everyone. I'm Dahlia Turner. I am the Chief People Officer at RegTech, a public company. I'm also based in Portugal, but as you can tell from my accent, I'm not Portuguese, but I have been here for a decade. Mental health and well-being is something that I think is so important for people to be talking about, to be aware of, and the role that, that companies and that your work plays in ensuring that you have a good mental health is really important. So I'm very happy to be talking about this topic today.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here, Dahlia. Pleasure. And Aisha, is that how you pronounce your name?
It's Aisha. Yeah.
Aisha, nice to see you.
Thank you. So I'm Aisha, and I am the global lead for culture, engagement, and employee well-being at Emirates MBT Group. I live in Tampa, but my work is between here and Dubai. So there's a lot of time management and well-being that we need to take care of across. This work is really important to me because, just as an individual, as a working mother who manages various time zones, I learned that great work happens when people aren't burnt out. And what well-being means across various cultures also differs. And so how do you bring that into one organization and define what that means in that company?
Absolutely. Thanks for being here. And last but not least, Tiffany.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tiffany Deans. I am the CEO of Grounding Work, and I'm located in Washington, D.C. area, so the nation's capital. And what I get to do every day is I get to help leaders get their employees to want to be at work, to love what they do, and to love the space and environment. So I do a lot of employee engagement, HR strategy, and then mental health is just a personal passion of mine. So I'm just really excited to be able to marry the two today.
Absolutely. And I believe you. I believe that. I can see the passion behind what you're saying. So thank you all, ladies, for being here. We're going to have a fantastic discussion today. So I'm going to kick us off with some personalized questions, if you don't mind. Rita, here's a question to kick us off. How important is it to gain leadership buy-in and advocacy regarding mental health initiatives? And why is this truly important?
Well, that it's fundamental if you want to succeed with your well-being initiatives, right? Because if you want, of course, you can just decide as a company to have well-being initiatives as part of your benefits, but that will not have the same impact as you include it on the strategy, right? And to include it on the strategy, you need to get the buy-in from the leaders, especially the top leaders, the executive ones. So that is the first step, right? To ensure that you have the well-being piece part of the strategy, the business strategy, you get the buy-in from them. So it's fundamental that they understand why well-being is important and how it relates with the productivity, with the results of the company, because there is for sure a correlation there. And then they should be the sponsors of the initiatives, and these messages should be cascaded down. So should be somehow embedded on the culture of the organization, and leaders are critical on the culture of the organization, as we know. So I would say that they are fundamental because without them and without get the buy-in from them, you are not able to embed this part of the cultural and to leave these in your daily work and integrate these in your HR agenda and to follow up as part of the business. So that's why it's so critical to have them engaged.
Absolutely. And just to kind of flow into the next question, Dalia, how would you address concerns and hesitations from the business leaders when talking about mental health, particularly when they don't think it's all, when they think it's all about offering an app or additional time off?
Sure. So I think Rita talked about it well when she talked about how that link between mental health and the business outcomes is so important, and the link and the correlation between the culture. When you take a look at, a number, a lot of the stuff that's written around mental health and work, it comes down to the behaviors and the culture of the company. And I think that, burnout is at the extreme end of it. But even before people started talking about burnout, we were already talking about the importance of, taking time away, being able to give people that break, being able to get them into the mental space where they could reflect and do their best work. And I think being able to talk to leaders about how the way that they engage, the way that they behave, the way that they are leading, with the way that they, whether it's they're taking a break or how they're talking about, their team's well-being, or is it just something that's not talked about and it's all about the performance? I think that that's really important, and being able to just have the conversation, and being able to have them understand the role that they play, and that an app and time away isn't going to fix anything. They're nice to have, they're a signal in the right direction, but it really is around, talking about it, really putting your people first and putting their well-being first.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Dalia. And I'd like to ask Amber, who recently joined us on the call, maybe Amber, if you could introduce who you are and what you do, and then I have a question for you.
Thank you. And thank you for allowing me to join. Of course, everyone would hate to be the person who has the tech difficulties, and I am that person. But I'm Amber Mallard. I'm a director of employee experience and head of people, and mental health and wellness initiatives are truly my passion, professionally and personally. So I'm really excited to be able to join this amazing panel full of wonderful professionals who experience making this business case, having to make this business case pretty much on the daily or quarterly at QBRs. So I know that there's going to be a lot of amazing information in this panel, and I'm excited to be here.
Thanks, Amber. And Amber, what are the most important things to measure when just starting a mental health and wellness initiative?
Yeah, so there's so much research out there currently, which is amazing, especially for those of us who, maybe are presenting this for the first time. So I would say my top 3 key metrics would be 1, industry benchmarking. So using that research that already exists to really get an understanding of where your organization falls within that industry standard. From there, I would suggest, especially if you're starting some programs, because mental health initiatives, especially like for someone with my background, I come from a lot of startups. So my experience is mostly in the startup space, low lean budgets, right? Lean resources. So when you're just rolling out some of these programs, start focusing on participation and engagement. From there, I would say employee satisfaction. So, listening tours, some pulse checks, things like that. So keep it more simple initially. And then as your programs continue to run, you can start tracking things like absenteeism, like sick days, productivity, turnover, retention. So things that take a little bit longer to track. And this is going to give you a really solid foundation that you'll be able to check in quarter by quarter, or however you tend to check in with your employees.
Awesome. Ladies, any other feedback for Amber or something you want to add?
I just want to have that. I think it's really important that you create a baseline for your organization, right? Because there is no solutions well, there are solutions that can be replicated, but are they going to work in your organization? You are not so sure, right? So you need to create the baseline. You need to understand what it means well-being for your organization, so you can have programs tailored to your population. And in my view, it's quite important that you start assessing the current status of the organization, right? What are the stress levels, for example, as Amber mentioned, using some surveys to collect that information, the level of engagement, the well-being piece, how the things are. So then, and you can listen people, right? So why not create some focus group to collect information from people and understand what well-being means for them, and what we are missing in terms of our organization that we can provide to our people to better support them and have a better impact on the results and on the productivity. That's what we want. So yeah, that baseline is fundamental before you start designing something, so you can then implement it.
Excellent. Tiffany, how can leaders effectively measure the impact of mental health initiatives on employee productivity and overall company success?
So I would say this. One thing I'm a big believer in is data. And I always say that data tells a story. And I love that where HR and people work, is moving now. We're really into the data. And so I believe, like Amber said, surveys, feedback is always a good place to start. A lot of the different apps or programs or things like that employees use, they'll have the metrics where you can see how often your employees are using these systems, if they're working, things like that. Also, other good metrics to look into can be, turnover, how often are people leaving the organization? You do that through your, exit surveys. And then also even just absenteeism, are people missing work more often? And if they are, what seasons, or, what's happening in the world that's, what's the correlation? So there are a lot of different ways to actually get the data to measure it. And then you also just, have your spidey senses as well. I think that's probably where we come in with all the people stuff. But, the data can tell a lot of the story, but then sometimes you just kind of inherently, you can tell on people's faces, how they interact with other people. So got a few different ways.
Exactly. And one more question for you. What do you see as the biggest barriers to integrating mental health initiatives into HR and other business practices?
So I would say the biggest barrier, or one of the biggest barriers, is just lack of awareness or understanding. So a lot of times, and I'll say it can be amongst your peers, or even, most especially with leadership. A lot of times it's kind of hard to get leadership to sign on or sign up for things when they don't understand, well, why is this an issue? Or, well, everything's fine here. We don't see this happening. But for those of us, who work with people, we see people, we hear from them day in and day out. So we are very much aware of, of what they're really going through, excuse me. And then I also would say, I think a lot of people, a lot of companies right now, it's shifting, but some people still think that mental health is, it's like either a buzzword or something that's kind of on the back burner. Like it's not as important as it is. And that, that it's not a huge connection with, with how employees show up, how they work, the, productivity. So I think that could be another piece of it as well.
Yes, absolutely. Anybody have any other ideas? What do you see as the biggest barriers to integrating mental health into the workplace?
If I may add to what Tiffany said, I think a big challenge we have as HR folks is historically, we have not been viewed as a strategic partner. We are viewed as a cost center when that does not need to be the case. And I think it's, whatever initiative that we're rolling out sometimes is viewed as HR's thing versus this is this is good for the business. This is going to help you achieve your numbers and so on. And so I think really using our time to build that trust, whether it's through the initiatives that we want to roll out, or if it's proactively approaching the business and understanding what they need and what pain points we can help them with too.
Absolutely. I like that a lot. Amber, what are some unexpected or less obvious benefits of prioritizing mental health at work?
Yeah, so when we're talking about mental health at work, the typical ones that we all immediately go to are stress reduction, improve morale or engagement. But something I think is really interesting and I think really helps HR professionals make our case is that mental health and wellness initiatives actually, I like to think of it as a spider web kind of, it has threads in all different areas. So, when we're talking about unique benefits, risk mitigation, there's so many studies out there that show that mental health initiatives, wellness initiatives can reduce legal and compliance risk or increase safety and even increase trust within teams, which then relates, it builds psychological safety. This very next point, this is my favorite point, and it's actually something I'm very passionate about, improved decision-making. Good mental health means you have better emotional regulation, and emotional intelligence, emotional regulation leads to, more thoughtful and strategic decisions. When you're not extremely stressed, you're thinking more clearly. When your emotions are balanced, you're not reacting directly you're not reactive. There it is. You're not reactive. You're actually able to step back, consider all these different perspectives. And then something that bumps up against that is future leadership development. So, when we're talking about succession planning, are we building leaders internally? And when you have initiatives like this, you are, because so many of the mental health or wellness, I'm using those two terms interchangeably here. These initiatives are actually the building blocks for effective leadership. So this is definitely where my passion lies within mental health and wellness. And it's something that I really have been trying to push within organizations, because as people professionals, we know that any sort of leaders that come out of organizations that we're in, they can go to other organizations, and eventually this culture that we're working spreads. And then, of course, my very last one that I love is the ripple effect. So if employees are happy at work, they spend majority of their life at work. If they're happy at work, if they're feeling good, if their mental health is good, that does ripple out to families, to, other teams, to your clients, customers. So yeah, I'm very passionate about this piece. And this is one of my favorite things to talk to executives about. Of course, I use a different type of language when I speak about this to them, because we always want to focus our language and make sure we're translating these benefits into business outcomes and tying them to our business goals, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's great. Excellent. Aisha, given the diverse cultural perspectives on mental health across the global workforce, how do you approach implementing well-being initiatives that are both universally effective and locally relevant?
Yeah, thank you. Amber touched on it earlier. When you are dealing with the executive leadership, you really do have to make sure that you're speaking their language. And what I have found through trial and a lot of error is that what it means to be mentally fit, or what well-being means in one part of the world means something completely different in the other. And then when you also have a large organization where employees are moving from various geographies every couple of years, you have to kind of level set every time they move. And so I think for us, what we focus on really is education, creating a oneness in what well-being means in this organization. We had our executives kind of all agree, if you will, on what that looks like, what is the language that's going to be used, and then what are the policies surrounding all of that that are going to protect our employees and protect our organization. And based off of that framework, we're able to implement rules and programs and things in various locations that are locally relevant, but still hold the integrity of the framework that comes from headquarters that really says this is what well-being means in this company, regardless of your ethnic background or your cultural background or whatnot.
So you mentioned that you work between Dubai and Florida, correct?
So yeah, and the programs that I run are in Turkey,
Mhm.
Egypt, KSA, Singapore, India, and so it's a beautiful mix of people and backgrounds,
Mhm.
and quite frankly, what something means in one place means something completely different, and also you're
Yeah.
dealing with various laws and things like that. So
Mhm.
how do you have sensitivity towards that, respect the culture, but also have a way of doing things as an organization that really has to be solidified and then rolled out meticulously and continuously reminding people what it means and correcting behavior as you go.
Great. So you have implemented various programs that are unique to specific countries, but all kind of level up into the same framework.
Absolutely.
That's interesting. Yeah, I love that.
Key, really allowing the countries to take it and make it their own, because now it's not
Mhm.
HR's program, it's theirs, and they own it, and they're very protective and they take very good care of it.
Right. And Dalia, do you find, like, your experience living in Portugal, that they have unique and different programs implemented when it comes to mental health than your experience back at home?
It's interesting. I was listening to Aisha's answer there, and I went back to something that I believe it was Tiffany said earlier, where you need to understand what the employee's definition of wellness is. And I kind of, it's interesting. And until Aisha talked about it, I've always felt that well-being, wellness and well-being was kind of like work-life balance, where it's a different thing to everyone, and everyone will have their definition of, you can email me all you want as long as it's not on the weekends, or, leave my holiday alone, because that balance piece is there. And when it comes to wellness, I think there's ties that are very similar to that, but then coming back to the amount of time you spend at work and the behaviors that people have, I really think that it is important to be able to articulate, when we talk about wellness, this is what we mean, because it could be anything. It could be financial wellness, it could be mental wellness, it could be physical wellness, and so being able to say, this is what we are hoping for. I love it. So Aisha, I love it. You're probably going to get an email from me later. With other people. Anyways, I do think that you talk about it differently in different parts of the world, because I think different parts of the world are at different spaces when it comes to talking about mental health. I think that, North America, it's very front and forward. The burnout is talked about. Australia, I would say, is the same. You get a lot of articles, whereas I think in Portugal, it's starting, and Rita can challenge me there, but I think it's starting to be talked about more, but not as much, and those ties aren't necessarily there. And then you can go, into other parts of the world as well, where you see different things. And I think as a global company, being able to do things to help bring employees that may not be in a country where some of these issues are talked about as much, it is really exciting, and being able to help, educate them and bring them on board about, yes, you can talk about menstruation. Yes, you can talk about mental illness. Yes, you can talk about being overly stressed and burnout. These are things that it's not a taboo topic, and bringing it up is not going to put your employment at risk. But different countries are at different stages there. And for some of them, just being able to say, we're offering a stress program, it's bringing them along that spectrum. And I think that, it's one of those topics where, yes, you want to be pushing the boundaries, but you also need to talk to people where they are today.
I love it. I'd love to know what different programs are being implemented all over the world, and educate others to understanding what those are. I mean, we could all learn something from each other. I think that's great. Aisha, one more question. Many companies struggle with low adoption rates for mental health programs like EAPs. Have you seen success in using gamification or other engagement strategies to encourage global employees to actively leverage these resources?
Yeah, thank you. Adoption is hard. And again, adoption depends on, for us, it has really, if you look at our data, it is so different depending on where in the world people sit. And there are multiple reasons for that. What is working in one country is working somewhere else for completely different reasons. And so I think what we have done, what we have seen to be successful is really creating, again, going back to diving into the data and creating bespoke programs to help push adoption in certain areas. In some places, we found that adoption was low because there was a taboo around calling like an EAP program for assistance. Are you crazy? Why are you using that? So we had to use education campaigns around what is acceptable, why this is okay, encouraging the male population to use it, and that was a solution for that area. In other areas, it's completely okay to talk about, but people are very busy and they just don't have time. And they don't realize that this is actually going to help prevent the burnout that's coming. And so we had to have different kinds of campaigns around that. And we have used gamification in terms of, being able to win certain, meaningful prizes here and there for people who are on the leaderboard and so on. And we have found that also works. But going back to really kind of creating this bespoke solution for your people, depending on what they need. And the way that happened was focus groups, leadership discussions, surveys, and we do it quite often. So we hear almost, instantly what our people are saying and what's working, what's not.
Wonderful. That's great. Okay, I've got some general questions just for everybody. So please chime in whenever you want. All right. So what are some well-being strategies that are missing today?
I can comment on that. So probably we still see some organizations that are looking to well-being as a nice to have, not as a strategical piece. So they have isolated initiatives and they don't have an overall approach for well-being. And maybe this is something that we are missing in most of the organizations. And the same with the proactive programs, because sometimes organizations are just reacting. When you start looking for the numbers and you see that something is wrong, or the absenteeism is growing, or the turnover, and then you start looking for those numbers, but then you could act proactively before, right, to avoid those kind of situations. And then I think, and again, linking with the initial topic about the leaders, probably we are missing building this awareness on the leadership. And maybe not only on the leadership, right? So create this awareness about well-being, how our brain works, how the things impact in our health, because we see a lot, and the studies demonstrate that more and more people have anxiety, depression, we see the burnout, and people just realize that this is related with the mental health in a later stage, right? Because first of all, I start experimenting different symptoms, an headache, a stomach ache, different kind of things, and I don't relate that immediately with my mental health. So it's important to start working on that self-awareness about the impact that some things can have in my life, in my health. And the same for the people managers. Create this self-awareness on the people managers so they can better support people and remove the stigma that we still see in the organizations to talk about mental health, because that still exists, right? It's not so easy to come and share that I'm facing a problem, a mental health problem. And so that stigma should also be focused and try to remove it.
I would like to just build on what Rita mentioned. So Rita, you mentioned focus on prevention, right? Being more proactive. And I think that is a huge one, because in the past it has been more reactive. But I also just wanted to say that another piece is that, and again, it may be my personal experience coming from more startups, but psychological safety, a lot of times, we're pushing these mental health or well-being initiatives, and there may not be leadership buy-in, or there may be buy-in, but they may not be modeling this behavior, or employees may not feel safe enough. So that's definitely something I've noticed from my experiences.
One of the things, if I may add, is, extending these benefits to families. So one of the things that we have done with the rollout of our global EAP is extend it to your entire household. Whether you have your parents living with you, your children, there is no limit. If you are an employee of this organization, anyone in your household is allowed to use the EAP. And we have found that our engagement scores have gone up, and our one of the questions that we have is around, your feeling of belonging in the organization, and people feel more connected because they feel like this is more than just saying you care. You actually do. My 17-year-old child is calling in and being helped with the program that is from my organization. So I think that's something that more companies can do.
Absolutely. If someone in your household is struggling, we're all struggling. So absolutely. What are some practical and affordable ways that businesses can support employee well-being?
I would say I feel like time is the best thing that you can give a person. I believe that just because that is something that we can't ever get back. And, time doesn't stop. And so I know that a lot of companies, they'll offer, mental health days, and which is great. But in my experience, I think having not just offering those days, but also the company acknowledging those days and say, hey, we're shutting down. These are the days each quarter. Like, we're not in office because it's a company-wide mental health day. I feel like that that shows the employees that, okay, like, they're really serious about this. We're really adopting this. And then also a lot of times, if you just have like a mental health day and, hey, you're free to take it whenever you want, a lot of employees won't necessarily take it because they may not want to be looked at or perceived a certain way. People are also, thinking about their performance. And so like they want to be in the office to make sure that they're, working hard and getting seen and stuff like that. So I think that giving people time and then actually, putting that time in the calendar, like this is company wide. And so that way people don't feel excluded or, singled out.
Absolutely. No, I love that. Amber, did you want to jump in? Go ahead.
Yeah, real quickly. So another thing that could be done is socializing, talking about these things. So if there's no funds right now, cool. What can we do? Create some peer support networks. Maybe in Slack, there's a channel. And, if leadership is comfortable and vulnerable enough and willing to, start having your leadership post about some of their struggles, because then it makes employees feel safer to then talk about that.
Absolutely. And providing, our leaders with maybe some training on how to have these conversations. I think those conversations, people are nervous to have those conversations.
Quick things you can do that are fun and free, which are my favorites. You can implement what we call coffee chats, and we have them monthly, and they are sessions where people kind of raise their hands, and it'll be like a leader or a manager or whoever from the organization. It could just be anybody who wants to talk about something pertaining to mental health or well-being, whether it's financial, social, whatever it may be. And people sign in. We have a cap up to 100 because we have gone up over that. That's one. And the other thing that you can do, I love the idea, Tiffany, of kind of having this structured like day where you close, but sometimes that's a little bit difficult to sell to leaders. We actually started building into our awards, the leader who really prioritizes mental health, and they get to kind of pit each other against one another, like who's doing the best job, and it's free and it's fun and people love it.
Oh, that's great. We haven't touched on AI yet in this topic, but how are some positive ways we can leverage AI with our mental health strategies? Does anyone have any thoughts on that they want to share?
I do, actually. So when AI when ChatGPT first came out, I started experimenting some, and I actually built this little bot that I was helping. I used it to help me kind of process, some emotions that were coming. We were having a big reorg. From there, Actually, my COO asked me, hey, what is this that you're using? And now you see all these AI tools that are coming out that are helping leaders, helping employees actually like process through some of these emotions. So it's essentially helping them like regulate their emotions in real time. And then the AI is able to say, hey, maybe consider from this perspective. So that was just my personal experience, but I can definitely see how AI in the future can help with some of these things, especially with our leaders when they have to address, maybe some questions, anonymous questions at a stand up, and maybe they're a little like, oh, how do I address someone who is, there's high emotion coming at me? And then on the opposite side here is AI is going to help us with our data, right? Like we're going to be able to really quickly pick up trends. So those are the two areas I see just from personal experience.
I'm going to build on how to use ChatGPT, and I think it's a great place to equip our managers where they may not feel as comfortable coming to us with how do I respond to this question, but being able to let them know you can go to ChatGPT, say an employee came to you, shared XYZ, what are different ways that you can respond in a way that is sensitive and all of those things. It gives them the confidence without having to depend on HR. So being able to equip them on how to deal with the different situations.
Excellent. All right, we have just a few minutes left, so I'm going to ask everybody, if there's one action that HR pros should take to prioritize employee well-being in 2025 that they can do right now, what would it be?
I am going to say listening right now. I know that there are so many amazing programs and initiatives, but 2025 has been heavy. And so, right now, listening, I think that some of the initiatives that may have worked in years past may not be as effective, or maybe there's things that, weren't as much of a need in the past that I feel like may be more of a need in 2025. But I would love to hear from the rest of the panel because there's been so many ideas that I've already taken from each of you. So I'm excited to hear from each of you.
Maybe I will say something that you mentioned already, Amber, and I think it's crucial and fundamental, which is the psychological safety. So I think definitely put some focus on that, on the psychological safety. Create an environment where people can speak up, where people can feel comfortable to share how they feel, and they feel that they are listening. And then there are a culture that supports that, so that my investment in 2025 would be more on that.
I think role modeling is something we can do right now. If you have a team, I run a team, I make sure that they know that they have to take their time off. When they're sick, don't log in because I don't require it from you. And then I speak up in HR leadership meetings to say, this is how we run things here. And if I see bad behavior, I will have, backbone and commit, as they say, and just say, no, we don't, that's not acceptable. So when you kind of role model that behavior, you give people permission to also stand up and be like, nope, that's not how we do things here.
I love that. Any other ideas, Tiffany?
Yeah, I love all of these, by the way. Like those would have been my answers too. Like I love them, especially the listening, Amber, and the role modeling, Aisha. But I will say this is kind of more like on a practical side, but I would also just say, I think in these times, like Amber mentioned, 2025 has been so heavy. It's been very, very heavy. And I think whatever we can do just to make things easier for people, that's what we should do too. So wherever our mental health resources are, whether it's on an intranet or somewhere, just making things just a little more easier and accessible, that makes a world of a difference. So it's like if someone's going through something and they have to search and try to find it, or have to, go through hoops to get in touch with someone, that can be frustrating, and that can add to whatever they're already experiencing. So just ease and accessibility.
A little goes a long way, folks. That's great. Well, ladies, we're almost out of time. I want to thank each and every one of you for participating in today's panel. Thanks for all of our listeners out there today. All right, this has been a really great conversation. I think we can pull out some really awesome topics from this, and we'll build out some more panels. So I hope all of you panelists come back, because we're going to continue this conversation. I can tell you that. So thank you so much. And our next panel for today is engagement strategies as a driver of performance, bridging people and productivity. So we'll catch you there in just a few moments. Thank you all. We'll see you soon. Great meeting you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Hello and welcome, everyone. We will be joined by our esteemed panelists to talk about engagement strategies as a driver of performance, bridging people and productivity. And just today, I actually posted on LinkedIn and I said, when people feel like they belong, they bring their full brilliance. When they don't, they bring their exit strategy. So with that, I would like to welcome our esteemed panelists. I believe we have Alyssa located here. Yeah, let me see if I can see everyone. We have Rhett, we have Kristen, and we also have Zach. So I would love if each of you could just take a moment to introduce yourself, Tell the folks why this is so important to you and where in the world are you calling in from? Let's start with Kristen.
Well, I am very excited to be here to talk about this because I feel like this is one of the things that is key to getting the best out of your talent. And I feel like if organizations can unlock this, we have the opportunity to drive a lot more in our organizations besides productivity by itself. I have been in the HR and OD and training space for well over a quarter of a century in various organizations. And one of the things that I really enjoy about the space is the variety of topics that we get to cover. But I am calling in from the very chilly Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
All right. Thank you so much, Kristen. And to my right is Rhett, if you wouldn't mind telling us why this is so important to you and where in the world are you calling in from?
Well, that's a great question. I'm getting ready to get on a plane, but back in New York, but I am in Dubai. And so it's about here, just finished a great dinner with some colleagues. And this is really, really important. That's why I wanted to be on this tonight, because engagement is one of those things that I don't think we pay enough attention. I'm a CEO of startups for a long time, and I've been a coach and an advisor to CEOs and founders for almost just as long. And this is something that we really, really, really have to be intentional about. And I often think we think one-off things are going to do it, and I just think that's not how this is not how you successfully build a culture engaged and productive and wants to be. And you just said exit strategy. That's not planning their exit. So that's important to me. I've just seen it firsthand that when you intentionally build a great culture of engagement and have a strategy for it, the sky's the limit you can accomplish. So that's why it's important. And but I do run a company, Accountability Inc., that actually works with companies that help build a great engagement.
Thank you, Rhett. And then to my bottom right of my screen is Alyssa. So Alyssa, same thing. Where are you calling in from, and why is this so important to you?
Great. Well, I'm in Boston. We're getting a bit of a snowstorm today, which is okay because we haven't had too much snow this year, but needless to say, I'm watching it come down pretty aggressively. This is everything to me. And the reason I say that is I started a company about 10 years ago called the American Confidence Institute. And it was a result of many, many years of studying the brain science of what allows people to be confident, and belonging was the center core of all of it, back to Abraham Maslow, 1940s, all the way through the brain science. And when I started to bring that content to different organizations, not just corporate, but government and nonprofits, you name it, I kept running into these structures called employee resource groups. And in 2018, nobody really was talking about them. So started what you see on my screen here, the Leadership Alliance. And now we have 25,000 organizations who are really working hard to figure out how to use these structures, these beautiful constructs, to bring belonging to every employee around the world. And so, yeah, it's kind of what I wake up to and I go to sleep about is how do we do more belonging?
Yeah, love it. Sounds like it is your life's work in this moment. All right. Thank you so much. And what about you, Zach? Excited to see you here. Tell us about why this is so important to you and where in the world are you calling in from?
Yeah, hi everyone. Pleasure to be with you all today. Zach Hang. I'm calling in from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I have I guess a very different kind of background, with respect to my fellow panelists here. Spent nearly 14 years in the consulting space, with the usual suspects in the space, right? The Deloittes of the world, the Accentures of the world, but spending a lot of time in organizational transformation, human capital strategy, and more recently have kind of made a left turn into HR proper, I'll say. And so I think a lot of what, as I think about what engagement means to me and why it's so important is I think Red is right. It's not talked about enough. And then to me, most importantly, from a career perspective, it's both personal and professional. Personally, there are so many different spaces in which along the journey in my career where I really didn't feel like I was, I belonged in that space, and as a result, my engagement took a hit, and I had leaders and managers tell me as such, right? And they're like, you don't feel like you're in it. And so I think that's why engagement is so important for me personally. But from a business perspective, it has a direct impact on an organization's bottom line. And once organizations and businesses start to realize that, then I think it's more of they'll spend more time focusing on those various initiatives that can help bolster those things.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I want to go back to something that Alyssa said. It's so interesting. Yesterday, I was on a college campus. I have a son who's on that journey. I have another who's there, but who's on that journey. And I was just amazed at the number of groups that they have, right? There are some student athletes, there are individuals who come, you name it, and they've got a group on a college campus. And so it's interesting that we have that in middle school, let's say high school, we have it in college. And then it's like we go into the business world, and it's like, nope, everybody's just supposed to be here together, and people long to belong. And the more you have people who feel like they belong, the higher the level of engagement. So the question that I have is really around ERGs. How do ERGs contribute to engagement and performance? And would love to start with you, Alyssa, because it was one of the things that you mentioned.
I appreciate it. Well, I can't explain why they are so unknown, but there's millions of these groups in corporate America, but also, like I said, government agencies, state and federal. They are international groups. We have a tremendous participation throughout Europe and Mexico and the Far East. They're all over. Nobody was really talking about them at all in 2018. And now depends on where you live and where you work, right? Of course. But there are groups for all different types of segments. And the language, of course, these days is a little tricky because not all these groups are, nor have they been necessarily aligned with DEI. They've been everything from, yes, Hispanic and Black and women and Asian and you name it. But we see groups for young professionals. We see groups for hikers. We see groups for speakers, people who want to get their professional speaking on. And there's a lot we can say in this session, which I won't get into if it's right or it's wrong. We even see religious groups. We see hobby groups of all different types. And depending on the organization, they may or may not fund them in the same way. They may be governed differently. But the reality is that you go to even an office, if you're called back into your office, and you may not know who's sitting next to you, right? People are plugged in with their earphones, they're doing their thing, they're doing their work. And so there is this, we know we're lonely as a culture. We know that there is this isolation, but we're losing all the beauty that happens when we bring people together, whether it's at the water cooler or at a summit or places where you actually have this human interaction. So these groups are, in my viewpoint, the central core of talent management of people and culture right now, because they are naturally bringing together people who at least have a starting place to talk about, right? Oh, you're a young professional, great. Or, you're a hiker, I'm a hiker too, right? So it's kind of mimicking what you said about the college campuses and bringing that, but these groups have been around since 1960s, right? And they've been kind of working in the background, and now all of a sudden they're the central core of the strategy for people and culture.
Yeah, love that. For some organizations, they are the center of excellence. People get the opportunity to, say, do marketing or do operations when it's not necessarily their day job, and they get that skill set and able to do that. Anyone else want to add to that question regarding the ERGs?
I'll jump in real quick.
Love that.
Having been a part of the service community for a long time, right now they're playing a role of a central place for communication and in information and decision making and commiseration. So they can also play a big role in people's experience and how they hear about things, because an organization where communication is broken, and not functioning well, they're a lifeline. So they're really critical.
Yeah, love that. I want to tie on to something. Go ahead, Zach. I also have a question for you, but go ahead. Go ahead. I have a follow-up question for you.
Yeah, I just want to add in real quick, right? I think, these spaces, these communities are an opportunity to be kind of in a safe space as well, right? People coming into organizations, especially new hires and such, are really looking to find their people, find their tribe, to help them kind of acclimate to the organizations. And what better way to do that than these communities of shared identities, right? And the faster they can get engaged, the faster they can meet people across their organization, the more likely they're going to stay engaged, but more likely they're going to stay longer with an organization. There's so many stories, myself included, where ERG involvement played an integral kind of role in my tenure. And so when you think about engagement from an ERG perspective, it leads to broader networking across an organization, which leads to other career advancement opportunities, which then leads to a more higher sense of like value and production within the organization. So it's a whole domino effect. And ERGs can be such a incubator for talent, and it is a shame to see a lot of organizations kind of not funding them appropriately, right? And so when you think about why those things are so important, it's, again, I'm going to reiterate, it goes all the way back to hitting the bottom line. This engagement, and ERG plays a huge factor in that engagement, in that engagement strategy.
Yeah, I love that. So many organizations, even from this is my accounting mind thinking, it doesn't have to be a cost center. Like, what if an organization believed that an ERG was not a cost center, but really when you think about investing in your organization, or you think about R&D, right? So just so many things that go into play. But I do want to follow up on something you said, because you talked about what it does for an organization when someone is engaged. Speak a little bit about when an employee is disengaged, and maybe you specifically, Zach, because I think you mentioned that in your intro.
Yeah, when your talent, when employees become disengaged, and they don't have outlets and communities, kind of like ERGs or similar organizations, the fallout of that is their team gets affected, right? Because team performance is affected by every member of the team. Each individual contributes to the team performance. So team performance can take a hit. If they're a sales organization, if they're part of a sales function, they're not engaged in their product or services that the organization sells, and their sales aren't meeting the expectations of their role or their team. There are so many different, and then on the individual side, if they're not engaged, like you said at the top of the meeting here, at the top of the session, you're looking for your exit strategy, right? You're questioning, did I make the right decision coming here? And I won't speak for anyone else here, but I certainly have felt like that. 30, 60, 90 days in, I'm thinking, is this did I make the right decision, right? And so I, like so many out there, have thought about, okay, well, I don't know if this is for me yet, so let me make sure my resume is still circulating, right? Just in case something may pop up later. So that disengagement means they're not fully in it, right? They're not fully invested in the organization and what the organization can provide to them from a lifestyle perspective, from a fulfillment perspective, from a career experience perspective. So it's such a huge thing to think about as people move from disengaged to engaged, right? As you come into an organization, you're not all the way engaged, right? You're still feeling it out. You're still trying to understand things, but as you progress along the journey, that if that disengagement continues to persist, you're only looking for your exit faster, right? So, and then the disengagement affects, now we're thinking about the bottom line and top line. So it's just a huge area of focus that every organization should be considering.
Yeah, I love that. And Kristen, would love to hear from you either on that or what are the signs where there are engagement or disengagement? Like, you don't have to speak personally, but if you could create a checklist for a new manager to say, when you see this, you might want to lean in and pay attention. So maybe a follow up to that, or even answering that question.
Yeah, I think that's such a great question. And if I could hand managers a checklist that was fail safe, I would absolutely do it. What of course we all know is that disengagement looks different for all of us, right? And so when I think back to when we were talking about the pandemic and we were all working remotely, we had this concept of a networked organization, right? And if you look at even some of the Microsoft tools, it'll show you the number of people you're working with, where they sit in the organization, what functions they're in, and all of those kinds of things. And it was this concept of building that networked organization. And so if I could give leaders just even one question to ask during their regular one-on-ones, it would be more around the conversation of who have you talked to that you wouldn't normally interact with, right? Who have you introduced yourself to that sits on a different team? How have you learned about the sales culture when you're sitting in the accounting function, right? So encouraging that buildup of that internal network in the organization is kind of one of those things that would lead a manager to be able to evaluate the engagement level of people on their team, right? Am I staying in my lane? Am I putting my head down? Am I doing my work? Am I not engaging outside of that on a regular basis, right? So everybody goes heads down for a project here and there. But when you think about those interactions, do we have people who are participating vocally in meetings? Do we have people who are participating in our group chats? Do we have people who are going out and asking questions, like seeking some of that as well? So again, if I could really give leaders a fail-safe checklist, I would do that. But we do know that disengagement looks different for everyone. And so leaders do need to spend time getting to know the people on their teams. And they have to have enough emotional intelligence and social awareness to be able to read some of that in their team members as well.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much. Anyone else have something to add?
Just, Alyssa, go ahead if you had. I had one quick thing, but go ahead.
Well, I just want to say I'm having a really hard time posting anything on the chat. So I apologize on the comments. So I apologize, but all those numbers that I think Zach was referring to in terms of engagement and showing the positivity of people belonging on the website that's above my head here, there's some free resources and there's numbers in all of those documents. So if anyone needs to show the business case for belonging and inclusion, they're there. So I just wanted to make sure people are aware.
Thank you. What about you, Red?
So, I just did a lot of research on this. I've got a new book coming out in September called Headamentals, and it's about just this very question of disengagement and how it actually impacts the team and how the team really talks to itself. And so, one person on a team disengaged, it does impact dramatically the people around them, the people that they go to lunch with, the people that they talk to in the office next to them, the talk at the water cooler. It has a negative impact on productivity. It has, and it's a real thing. And to everybody's point, it's something that we really think about because it is impacting your team and it's impacting your revenue. And you have one person on your team that's disengaged, it impacts everybody.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think you mentioned, Rhett, that you are a coach. That's one of the identities that you step into. And one of mine is facilitating coach, keynote speaking. And I often tell leaders that there's another skill set to leadership that is so important, because in the chat, someone asked about remote workers, and it comes up every time. Like, how do you keep people engaged in a remote setting? And I say, you better be a really good facilitator. Because the space that you are holding, right, you've got to be mindful of what's going on in each of those small boxes. You've got to mind the chat. You need to know what energy is coming into the space at that time and how do you manage that energy. So just a question for each of you. What's a tip that you might give leaders to help as it relates to engagement in a virtual setting?
I'm going to jump in if that's okay, because one of the things that makes it even harder is that not everybody wants to engage. And what I mean by that is you have neurodiversity, which is even harder sometimes on a remote, this kind of online situation. You have people who might have all kinds of distraction in their background. You might have people who are very happy to listen and process and then comment later. Right. So as a facilitator, you have a really hard job. But I think particularly in a remote environment, part of the job is to meet people where they're at. Accessibility aids and all that are absolutely necessary. But I think as a leader, you also have to be very sensitive that no matter what you say or do in that meeting, that may not be the way to engage with that person. So understanding how they want to be engaged with. And I'll give you one last example. Sometimes when we go to recognize people, the key to belonging is letting people know that they matter. Well, if I do that in a public environment where there's lots of other people, not everybody's going to be happy that I did that to them. So really being a little bit, not even emotionally intelligent, but being really one-on-one, like how do you want to engage and what is considered to be good for you? Yes, it's more work, but it can also save a whole lot of pain later on if you don't do it right.
Yeah, great. What about you, Brett? What would you say?
I would echo that. I think I have a client who before the pandemic used to go to lunch with his one person a day. He has about 200 people in his organization. He went to lunch with everybody in that organization at least once a year. And so since the pandemic, they went remote. Pretty much remote. And so now he does a lunch with him online or via Zoom. So he's maintained that personal contact and he asks those questions. What can I do to make this better? What can I do to make this easier? What do you need that you're not getting? And he asks them the questions, how they want to interact with him, how they want to he over communicates. He informs them what's happening in the company, and he's always been a good communicator. But this has made it more challenging. It's not person anymore, but he has made the effort, and that's I think paid off. When you do the engagement surveys, he gets marks like I've never seen. So that's that. It comes down to communication and to Alyssa's point, asking questions, how people want to interact.
Yeah, I love that. Curiosity and intention. Kristen or Zach, anything else to add?
Yeah, I think the conversation around connection is really important, but I think we also have to look a little bit bigger in terms of that concept of, for people who want to grow, who want to experience different things, how are we engaging those folks as well, right? And so there was some conversation initially around the ERGs and how to leverage that group to contribute to the business, right? Not just be a cost center, but if you're thinking about handing out strategic projects, if you're thinking about innovation, those can also be opportunities for people to engage. And to Alyssa's comment, engage in a way that's comfortable for them. And thinking about that in also terms of developing those skill sets that they're interested in, right? So they have the opportunity to almost opt into some of those things. That really puts the autonomy in the person's hands as well, because I think when we are doing things that are more prescriptive, sometimes it can feel like we're losing some of that autonomy as people in organizations too.
Yeah, definitely. And you, Zach, any thoughts on that? Any suggestions?
I mean, I agree completely with what everyone already said. I mean, I will key in on and reiterate a point that was made is that it's a very individual thing, right? How you engage with all your staff. I have led many remote teams over my career, and it's very difficult. There's just no other way to describe it. It's very hard. It's very challenging. Everyone has there are different ways to engage. Some like to be have their video on, some prefer not to. And then how do you deal with that, right? But I think Alyssa made a great point around, spending time one-on-one. I love the point about being curious. Sometimes the one thing I did so often with my staff is I carved out just general time. It doesn't have to, we don't talk about work, we don't talk about the project, we don't talk about anything business related. But the space was there and available to them to say, hey, like, if you just want to get like increased connectivity with me, with one another as a team, let's find some like team building opportunities. Like that was just a way for them to strengthen their relationships and their work dynamic that they otherwise wouldn't be getting, instead of just all business all the time, right? And there's a place and space for all of that. But I think the most important thing that we've talked about so far, all of us, is like just being very intentional and being very curious around the person's interests, what they value and how they value it. Sometimes they want to be rewarded with cash. Great. Here's an incentive for all the great work you've been doing. Some people are like, I don't care about the money. I care about being able to advance further in my career. Great. Here are some opportunities for you to think about, and here, how can I help you get there, right? And so it's really individual. It's very tailored. But the most important thing is really make them feel like they are part of a greater whole. If they don't feel part of the fabric of the team and part of the greater picture of the company and what they're striving to achieve, the engagement is gonna start to diminish a bit. And it is an active effort. Every leader must understand that it is an active and proactive measure to ensure that your team is cohesive. So yeah, remote leadership is extremely difficult, but the ones who do it well reap the benefits.
They do. You know what's interesting? Music is one of the things that connects people, right? There are very few people that don't like music, but your genre might be different, but most people connect to music. And it's interesting, I was talking to a leader one time and they said, I connect with my team and I get them more engaged through music. And so I know the type of music or the genre that each of them likes. And so when we come into this space, oftentimes when we have meetings, there's music playing. And so if someone hears their song that they like, ooh, I'm more connected. And it may not be my favorite song, but I like that genre, or it's a song that takes me back to something that I recall. So sometimes I think we overthink this thing. And sometimes we have to get back to the basics of remembering that the people that are in there are the same people that we see at concerts, the same people we see in the grocery store, the same people that we see everywhere. And in all of those spaces, they want to feel a sense of belonging, and they also want to feel a sense of engagement. So I know one of the things that we had talked about earlier, we were just doing a brief conversation around the brain science around engagement. Anyone have some statistics? Anyone done any research? Anyone have any questions about what that brain science might look like? I see us over there chomping at the bit. Give it to us.
Sure. Well, I think there's something that we haven't said here that does relate to your answer, which is the employee also owns some of this engagement, right? It's not just the leader. And in reality, you can't make somebody engaged, right? They have to want to be engaged. And so fundamental to brain science is that if there's a will, there's a way, but if there's no will, there's no way either. So assuming that that is something that the employee wants, and there is a coaching air in this room, I know it, part of our job as a leader is to be that coach and figure out what is missing from that person's ability to engage. Is it a work, a physical thing? Is it, maybe they don't have a good connection, internet, it could be something simple like that. Maybe they hate their job. Maybe they don't like what they're doing, unearthing that through that curiosity and that coaching hat can make a really big difference. But once that is unearthed, to take that burden on as the leader, personally, I don't think is right. In order for that person to really be engaged, they have to take ownership. They have to say, okay, I understand this is what's making me feel not connected, not belonged, and subsequently work with that relationship if that's comfortable to figure out what is it that that person can do for themselves so that they can be better connected. I was tempted to write yet another book, and I promised my family I wouldn't do it for a while, but I do think that inclusion, engagement, belonging, these are team sports, right? This is not a solo thing that a leader gets to champion. We have to be in it together. We have to help each other figure out where those disconnects are. But at the core of it, at the brain science of it, if I don't want to do it, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to change a behavior. I'm not going to change a habit. I'm not going to change my words. I have to want to do it. And if I want to do it, taking agency, taking ownership of what that action is, getting accountability perhaps from my leader and my coach, great. But I got to be the one that gets engaged and does the engagement work more than expecting anybody else to do it.
Yeah, definitely.
Is that enough? I don't want to get into too geeky.
No, that's enough.
So I'll speak the rest of the day, so I won't do it.
I mean, each of us have been in situations where maybe we didn't feel very engaged. And it could be because of things that are going on outside of work. It could be the leader. It could be the work that we're doing. So what's maybe a life hack or something that, because Alyssa said the employee has to own some of this. So what's some things that maybe each of you have done to say, okay, reboot, let's get back engaged and let's do this conversations with people, like just share some of those if you wouldn't mind.
I think one of the things that I try to do is I try to alter how I show up. Like even the physical change of the way that I walk, the energy that I bring into a call or to a room. I know that as a leader, I impact the people around me. And so if I'm coming in because I'm frustrated, I'm disengaged, I'm, not feeling it today, there are some situations where I will tell my team, I am not going to be able to lead this call the way that I want to, so we're going to postpone it till tomorrow, right? So there's some of that self-control of even just how we show up. Are you saying hello to people when they come into a call, or do you have yourself on mute and you're doing something else? Are you really being the person that you need maybe your leader to be, and showing up in that space? And again, you fake it till you make it kind of thing, right? There's this concept that you can kind of alter how you show up in that space. It might not make you like the work anymore. It might not like you get along better with your manager, but there's only certain things, to the point I think Alyssa was making, there's only certain things we can control. And how we show up is probably the biggest thing that we can control.
Yeah, thank you. Anything from you, Zach?
Yeah, and Kristen hit it right on the head. I was going to mention just role modeling, quite simply, right? Being vulnerable about your own challenges that you're experiencing, whether it be personal or professional, right? If it's, hey, I got my kids XYZ thing going on this week, and I gotta take time for that, or I think another thing is that people often don't talk about enough of is PTO. Organizations give you PTO and people are so afraid to take it sometimes. And so take your vacation. It's given to you, and make time for it, plan for it, and do things that re-energize you, can reignite all those different the energies that you have, that help bring your best self to work, right? Belonging is a fundamental human need, right? And so when you have the engagement and the belonging, it leads to all sorts of great outcomes. But the stress that comes from work, the stress that comes from personal lives, the stress caused by lack of social connection and interaction, all plays a role in how we show up in our day-to-day lives, in our day-to-day work. And so the more we can kind of stave off some of that stress or mitigate some of that stress, or just kind of help to rebalance ourselves, that's where you will see talent sort of just skyrocket, right? So I think, again, role model it for yourselves. For those who are leaders, informal and formal, leading different teams, I encourage you to practice vulnerability, share things outside of work that are affecting you, and take the time, right? And delegate, right? As leaders, we can delegate. Hey, hey, Susan, I can't run the team today because I got to take some personal time for myself. But I think you can do it. And it's an opportunity for them, right? To step up into a leadership role. So there's so many different ways that we can ensure there's balance, or the best we can, right? I don't like the term work life balance because I don't think there's ever any balance. But I think I digress on that point. But it's really about role modeling, and that was a long-winded way of saying is all about role modeling.
Yeah, I love that. We're going to go into our final question. So maybe if I could hear from everyone just a minute or so, and then we will definitely close out the session. So I'm the CFO of the company, and I'm looking at the bottom line, and you want all these things around engagement. What's the business case, like the bottom line? If you could, if you're in a meeting with me, and I'm going to give you maybe 30 seconds to prepare for it, what are you going to say to me about the bottom line, why we need to have people engaged or higher levels of engagement within our organization? What's the ROI? And we'll start with, let's start with Alyssa. All right, get what you got.
What I got, I'm trying to find my actual numbers here so that like I can give them to people, but needless to say, of course, here we go. All right. No, it's good. It's good. It's good. Well, first of all, we know that over 50% of people will leave a job if they don't find a good friend or some kind of a relationship outside of just the business team within their organization. 50%. Now, average employee in the United States to hire, and I say average, of course, it depends on the region and the type of job, but you're talking at least $100,000 to $150,000 to replace that employee in hard costs. That doesn't include the time and energy that everyone's going to interview yet another person. It doesn't include all the aggravation factor that someone's like, we got to train somebody again. So, the costs are real if somebody is not engaged and they leave, and the chances of them leaving, better than 50%, not so good. We know that from engagement studies. Now, engagement studies have been, these long done things where sometimes they're once a year, sometimes they're done in pulse studies. We know that people who are that are involved with ERGs are much more engaged. When I say much more, up 10, 20% more engaged. So that engagement is really a positive thing. In fact, we see that organizations that have healthy ERGs, even people who are not part of them, the engagement is higher. If you're a CFO, though, and I think you picked that on purpose, engagement and CFOs are kind of still, you got to close that gap. So talking about retention and acquisition, but let's talk about innovation. We know that these groups that are more engaged, these people that are more engaged, we get 2x more innovation speed because they feel that they can say and be creative in those opportunities. So, those are real numbers. And if that one doesn't float people's boat, productivity, we know that productivity is higher by usually 10 to 20% in organizations that have more engaged, more individuals that are belonging. So those are the numbers that I was referring to. That's why I was so eager to get people that resource.
No, thank you. And I haven't been able to get to the chat because we've had so much that we've talked about. But again, those that are online with us, please put the numbers in there because these are the types of things that organizations are looking for. So we only have about 3 minutes. So if we could make it anything to add to that, I'm going to Rhett, then I'm going to go to Kristen, then Zach. So Rhett.
Well, number one, I'd come in as a CEO and say, look, I want to build a watch your back culture, not a got your back culture. And that's the kind of culture we're going to build, and we're going to support these things because I know they work. I've worked on championship teams, and the hallmark of a championship team is everybody's got your back. Even when you make mistakes, you brush them off, you move on. That's the kind of culture that wins. And I mean, I'd have to. I'm not a numbers guy so much, so I'd struggle with the numbers part, but I can tell you what wins, and it's a gotcha back culture.
Love that. Thank you. What about you, Kristen?
Yeah, I would agree with everything that's already been said. The statistics are out there. Doing some research and then creating the actual metrics of dollars in your organization are things that all HR people can do, right? So the cost of turnover, the days to hire, all of those things. And again, it's those best practices that, again, the numbers and the statistics are all there. It's applying them to your company where HR can actually add that value.
Yeah, love that. Very critical. What about you, Zach, as we close out?
Yeah, we often talk about, with them, what's in it for me, right? And when we talk about an investment to these leaders, to all leaders across the organization, statistically, engaged workforces are 21% more profitable. 21%. That is significant revenue that could be generated from an highly engaged workforce. So if any leader needs a why, a compelling reason, there it is. Top line revenue.
Wow. Thank you all so much. You could have been on CNBC today. All right. Thank you again, everyone in the audience. Continue to keep the comments coming. To each of you, have a wonderful day. And to Rhett, safe travels. All right. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you all.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Hacking HR's People and Culture Strategy Summit. Welcome. I'm Daniela Page. I'm Hacking HR's Chief Learning Officer, and I will be your moderator for today. I'm joining you from the beautiful Riviera Maya here in Mexico. Please let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from. We have an exciting discussion ahead with our expert panelists, and this session will run up to 40 minutes, so stay tuned. Plus, all the participants who stay until the end will receive a Credly badge, so please be sure to stick around to earn yours. Jessa, would you kindly bring our experts to the stage, please? Hey, everybody, how's it going?
Great. How are you?
Very good.
I'm good. Nice to see you. I'm excited to be here. And I see Adrina's popping on here too. Hello. Hi. So what I'm thinking is we should probably introduce ourselves and tell everybody who we are, what we do, and why you love this topic. Why are you here today? So maybe we'll just start around the room. DJ, how about you?
Sounds good. You guys can hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Just wanted to make sure. So DJ Campbell, I'm the Chief HR Officer for Sanford Health. We are a Midwest-based health system. And so while you're in the Riviera Maya, I am in Bismarck, North Dakota, and the high temperature today is -3. So a little bit of a different weather climate. But really what interests me in this leadership development and looking at, how we prepare our business leaders and our team managers is, I think what's all going to differentiate when you talk about AI and everything that's going to happen to the workforce in the next, 5 to 10 years, it's really about preparing our leaders and making sure that they understand that they are going to be the #1 asset to any organization as we go through all of these extreme changes. I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
It's great to have you, DJ. Thank you. And Nicole, over to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nicole Roberts. I am the Chief Consultant and founder of People Solutions Group. I spent 20 years in HR leadership in corporate America and have pivoted that into helping individual organizations now at a broader scale with their organizational transitions, especially when we're looking at getting future-ready leadership. And I'm also the host of the upcoming Amplify Your Signal podcast, where I'm featuring individuals who are in a job transition or in search and helping them share what's beyond their resume. So really excited to have this conversation with everybody today and looking forward to it.
Great. We're lucky to have you here. And Jess, hey again, how are you?
Hi, so good to see you. Hi, everyone. I'm Jess Goldberg. I'm a leadership communication expert and a company trainer. I've worked with thousands of leaders around the world from companies like LinkedIn, Notion, Microsoft, Google, Netflix. You name the big company, I've probably worked with at least one of the leaders there, helping them train up, helping them get future ready. I also teach the next generation of leaders at Columbia University. I teach leadership and communication skills there. So I'm really excited to be diving into this topic today with all of you.
Thank you for that intro, Jess. And Felicia.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Felicia. I'm the CEO at CPO Playbook. We're an HR consultancy and executive coaching firm. I also have a podcast called CPO Playbook, where we interview leaders and executives around the world to solve a business challenge in every episode. So entrepreneurs, CFOs, CEOs, other chief people officers as well, which is a lot of fun. And so I'm really excited to be here, and thank you for having me.
Well, welcome. We're happy to have you here as well. And Adrina, can you hear us? We'll see if she'll pop on in a few moments. We may as well get started, shall we, folks? So I have some questions for today, and we're going to get started with the first one. What key skills will define a future-ready leader in the next decade? Does anyone want to jump in on that one?
I can jump in. I actually did an episode on this. We interviewed the chief HR scientist at AI HR, and we discussed kind of what does it look like for the future, especially with AI, right? And I think that there's a couple pieces of competencies that I wanted to share. So one of them is just the ability to be comfortable and deal with ambiguity. There's a lot of unknowns, and leaders who I think kind of try to predict or say that they know it all, I think are going to get stuck. I think that when leaders are really authentic and say, hey, like, we don't know what the future is going to hold, but here's how we're dealing with it. And here's what we're going to do moving forward. I think that tells a better story, and people are more likely to build trust and get behind that type of leader. And I think the other one is just being resilient. There's a lot going on in the world and a lot going on in our businesses based on the impact that the world is having around technology and politics and weather and everything else. And so we have to kind of, I think, be role models as leaders to say, we just dealt with something really hard, and here's how we're going to bounce back. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to see if it works. And if it doesn't, this is the next thing we're going to try. Right. And I think, again, going back to the role modeling of making sure that we're doing that, I think is going to be the biggest impact to kind of implement that resiliency.
Yeah. I'm happy to share a little bit more on that. Love that, Felicia. I think you really hit on one of the key things. So I believe that there are 3 key skills that future-ready leaders need. The first one is technical. Their leaders are going to need to have to know how to use AI. They're going to have to know how to prompt engineer, or it might change to, more details. It might change as we evolve. They're going to need to know more technical knowledge than they currently do. And so we're going to need a lot of upskilling and sometimes even reskilling in that domain. A common phrase that a lot of people are saying right now at the cutting edge of this is AI isn't coming for your job. It's someone else using AI that will be taking your job. And so really it's going to be important that, one, we have more technical knowledge than we currently do. And that can be scary and that can be challenging. And we can talk about that throughout today's, topic. The second is what Felicia was talking about. It's adaptability. We need to be able to be adaptable in order to shift and change. But what might we need to learn? What might we need to change? What might we need to rethink at our organization? And then the third key one is human-centric skills. And those are evolving every day. Each day with every new technology, we learn a little bit more about what it means to be human. In the early 19th century, over 80% of workers were working on agriculture. Now it's less than 2%. So those jobs of picking berries are not what we consider as being distinctly human skills anymore. But now the human-centric skills are things like being able to build relationship, being able to negotiate, being able to have morality, and deciding what are the inputs that are going to go into these AI systems. So it's really those 3 key skills that we need to be thinking about for future-ready leaders. More technical knowledge, adaptability, and some human-centric skills that might change and evolve as technology advances. But we need to be continuing to think about what are those ones that AI can't take over.
Great, Jess and Felicia. Does anyone have anything different that they were thinking when it comes to defining a future leader? What skill set that maybe that wasn't mentioned? All right, the next question is, what are the most significant leadership blind spots that could hinder companies from preparing for the future? So, blind spots.
I'll start that. So I think one of the worst mistakes that you can make as an organization is to have your agenda fully outlined ahead of time. Your plan start to finish, and you haven't taken the time to actually gather some feedback and some insights very early on to see if this is the right path for the organization. And sometimes you can get so far down on your own agenda and what you've decided in a vacuum that is really going to move the needle. And it's something that's not resonating with your culture, not resonating with your teams. And you can really do a lot of damage very quickly if you don't take a minute, get that feedback, get that understanding of where this initiative is landing, and then course correct if you need to.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think as we go into this area where we're going to have significant change, it's great to understand that I think leaders they're gonna see a lot of technical fixes wanting to be used in the marketplace. And so I think as leaders, we really need to make sure that we're understanding what that strategy is, and we have that roadmap. And we've got, like Jess and Felicia had talked about earlier, that adaptability as we go through that process, but always have our eye on the prize long term of what we're looking to achieve.
Thanks for that, DJ.
If I can add to that, that'll be great. I do apologize. I'm having quite a bit of weather where we are, so I apologize for the connection. But everyone, Adrena Walker, AVP of Human Resources for the University of Vermont Healthcare Network. And the one thing that I often tell a lot of my senior leaders as it relates to blind spots is never forget that you should always be a student of your craft. And what we do, we're learning, we're growing, we're evolving. Things are happening faster than we can track them down. And I find that oftentimes senior leaders, especially when they're well-liked and loved, they stop being students of their craft. And the minute they stop being students of their craft, they pass them by, or they find themselves where the business is in a space where they cannot adjust and evolve to. Or sometimes the uptick is too much and we forget to do succession. So often some blind spots can come in the positive when things are going so well and feeling so great that we often forget that we still need to prepare and evolve and continuously keep ourselves competitive.
That's a really great point, Adrena. And I'll just kind of add to that. Here's a question for you. How can leaders prepare their teams now to be future ready?
I think it's a balance. I think it's a balance of two things. Who we are now, and do we have what we need now? And the second part of that is, I like to call it, who do we want to be when we grow up? So when we sit down and we dream and we have our future state and money's no option, we got all the right head count, all the right talent, who do we want to be? How do we see ourselves serving our communities, our teams, our stakeholders, all of those that we impact and touch? And then we build for that. And it's reassurance in saying to you, hey, Adrena, I see where you are now and I see where you can fit for the future. And this is how we're going to help you get there. I think it's targeted, intentional, and communicative development, current state, to help us see the future. You know, sometimes we as C-suite leaders can sit in the room and we put the future together on the wall, and that's where it stays. And we prepare for it, but we don't take that message and herald it, nor do we actually parse that message out to those where it matters most. So I'm in healthcare. So it's helping my frontline workers understand where they fit in the vision 10 years from now. It's helping the community see how can we continue to serve them 10 years from now, and bringing them along the journey with you. That to me, I find gives a lot of people comfort in knowing that AI is not going to take my job, or someone who's using AI is not going to take my job. Because guess what? My organization has invested in me that I'm the person using the AI that's going to keep my job and evolve it. So I think it's a very fine balance, and organizations that are at the forefront of that balance are doing very well and having entirely high employee engagement scores. And organizations that are not really paying attention to that and feel comfortable where they are the ones that are having employees leave, and they can't quite articulate why their employees have decided to move on.
That's great. Does anyone have any feedback for Adrena that they'd like to mention?
Adrena, I think that was a really wonderful response, because I agree with you in the sense that helping people understand where their future is in the organization, what their career outlook is very powerful. I think that there are some instances too where, let's face it, AI will take some people's jobs, and I've already seen it happen. I think where we can best prepare people for future leadership is, how do we adapt so we leverage AI as a colleague, right? Not just a piece of technology, but how do we leverage it where we're not just doing, work that may be outdated, but now how do we adapt our skills to leverage AI to be more productive, be a bigger value add to the business? And so I think going back to what Jess had said, being technical, I think or technically savvy, I think is very important in order to be adaptable because of the era that we're in AI. And then also, I think also just how we're going to prepare them from a tactical standpoint. Not the only way, but one of the greatest ways to change behavior is through performance management and making sure that you kind of have your eye on the ball, in the sense that, you have a very clear understanding of the competencies, not just for the business, but also for that person's function or their role or their level, and being able to clearly say, these are the competencies that you're going to be, your performance review is going to be playing against, and then making sure that you have rewards tied to those achievements, right? So if you want people to be more adaptable throughout the entire organization, then you need to say, okay, adaptability is going to be a competency that you get scored on in performance management. And then we'll be able to say, if you score high in your competencies for your review, these are the rewards that you're going to get. You have to make sure you tie that in, right? Otherwise, people are going to say, well, why should I care? So there's a few things that you can do there, but I really agree also with what Adrina and both Jess had said earlier.
I would love to call out a couple of things I'm seeing in the chat that people are talking about with blind spots that are really important. I saw Robert and Anne Marie talking about blind spots, and there's one big blind spot that they both mentioned that's really important, which is like the bias towards action when we have new tech, that we get so excited about having this new tech that sometimes we don't actually think about what's the problem we're actually solving. Why are we using this right now? And so we drive forward really fast, but maybe we're solving the wrong problem. And so making sure that we're addressing the right problem is really important. Before we drive forward on action is what's the problem we're trying to solve? How can we most effectively use this? And how do we bring everyone on board and make sure that we're upskilling, reskilling, giving the right resources to help people move along?
How can leaders cultivate a culture of continuous learning and innovation within their teams?
I'm happy to dive in and kick this off. So one of the biggest things is there was a study that Google did about a little bit over a decade ago. It was called Project Aristotle. And what they did was they looked at why are some teams more innovative than others? What makes this one team way more innovative than that team? And they started to try and analyze and figure out what are the key qualities. But they found out what it was one key quality. And that key quality is probably going to surprise you if you haven't heard of this study of what actually differentiates them. And that's actually psychological safety. The ability for everyone within the organization to feel safe to share their opinions, their new ideas, to say, raise their hand, hey, I think that there's something wrong with this. Can we slow down for a second? So psychological safety is the basis of forming trust, and trust is the basis of allowing people to work collaboratively well together and create innovation. So psychological safety is really one of the key things that allows us to experiment more, which allows us to be more innovative at our workplaces.
Love that. Love that. Anyone have any other ideas? How can leaders cultivate a culture of continuous learning within their teams?
Well, I completely agree with Jess, 100% as it relates to psychological safety. And I think that leaders have to understand that psychological safety means something different to everyone on their team. And especially for leaders who have the ability to manage a smaller team, you have the ability to dial in a little bit differently. And I think in organizations, they have to understand what are the fundamental values. And many times you can get that through a Gallup survey, employee experience survey, feedback, focus groups of my organization that we can promote to allow psychological safety to come through. And then when we hire leaders, let them understand and know that psychological safety and the ability to give it as well as receive it is a non-negotiable. Like if we are going to continue to be innovative in this organization, this is what is expected of you as leaders. I feel like, especially post George Floyd and going into the environment we're in now, a lot of times our leaders in our organizations think psychological safety is optional. And then to Jess's point, they can't figure out why they're not performing, or they can't figure out where there's no cohesion, or people walk out of the door and they never speak to anyone, and the only time they talk to each other is when they come inside because they're on the same team. So I think really understanding the importance of psychological safety as a foundational motivator, and understanding that it's just more than just getting people to do the work, but it's helping them show up with their entire whole selves at work. That to me just highlights and illustrates the Google study as well as what Jess brought out. I 100% agree.
Go ahead.
One other thing that comes to mind, I did an episode with the executive vice chairman of Cirque du Soleil, Daniel Lamar, and we talked about creativity in an organization. And in that episode, it was a very clear message that innovation comes from diversity. And a lot of times diversity programs are really focused on numbers of people or types of people or ethnicities or genders in certain groups. And I think that that's really a symptom of what's happening. I think the goal around diversity programs should really be innovation and continuous learning. I think that's when you get the most out of your people and out of your team. And it's through the ability to hear different perspectives and see things in different ways. And I think diversity is just like that hub. And that's kind of what Daniel Lamar was talking about, because he has one of the most creative, innovative companies in the whole world. And he would say in the interview, he would say, we never had a diversity problem. He's like, we always picked people from around the world based on pure talent. And the Cirque du Soleil is just the idyllic company for what happens when you have these diverse backgrounds in a business. And it really is the result of innovation and continuous learning.
Love that.
I think adding on as well to that, when it comes to, fostering that culture of psychological safety, fostering that culture of continuous learning, is really leading by example. If your direct team doesn't see that you are having a spirit of continuous improvement with yourself and with them, and you're encouraging experimentation, you're encouraging, failure is just first attempt in learning. So if you're encouraging people to try new things and it's safe, and that there's not a punitive result if it's not successful, and you can use that as a data point versus as something that's going to impact somebody's success, then you're going to get a lot more repeat behavior, because that's what you're encouraging in your team and others.
Absolutely. How should leaders navigate resistance to change while implementing these future-focused strategies?
So there's really two key things that need to happen in order to navigate resistance. The first is that we need to understand what are the psychological barriers that are happening. What are the reasons why the resistance is happening? Are people resisting the technology because they're worried their job is going to be, they're like, we're going to train this AI and then it's going to take over my job and then you're going to fire me. What's the resistance that's going on? Can we actually understand what the root resistance is? Are they afraid they don't have the skills that's needed for this next phase? And then how can we actually address those? Can we meaningfully make sure that if they are worried they're going to lose their job, that we're helping upskill them so that they can be the ones that can be using the AI tool? How can we make sure that we're giving them comfort that they're going to come along the journey with us? And you have to be honest and true about that. Are you going to keep these employees? Because you don't want to give them false promises, because that's going to create a lot of problems. If you promise them that there's not going to be layoffs, then there's a huge amount of layoffs. So we have to understand the psychological barriers and then make the key promises that we truly can and try and bring them along the way. And then we also need, the second thing, we need to clearly communicate why we're doing this. Because if they don't understand the why, no one's coming along for the journey. They need to understand why we care about this. Are we going to be able to help more customers? Are we going to help more clients? What's the real reason? What else can we do with it? And can you tell a story that's actually going to motivate and inspire people? It's not just profit driven only. Now, profit might be a big part of it, but what are the other elements that are part of it too? And can we clearly communicate that? And even if it is profit, can you clearly, make that delineation of how that will actually increase it so that they know? Because some people will think that, oh, it's just an idea, but will it actually account for that? So can we clearly communicate that?
Yeah, I think Jess's comments are fantastic and spot on. I think another thing to consider is really, as the leader, being able to figure out and build strategies to help listen to your team, to understand where they're coming from. Oftentimes we package up a strategy and we think it's great, but we've got to be on the front lines. We've got to ask the right questions. We've got to be curious and not judgmental of what those answers are going to be, and not take it offensively when people are giving us great feedback to work off of. And I think that starts at the top, right? I mean, our CEOs, your C-suite individuals need to be the people that are being seen, listening to individuals and helping them bring that feedback. And then, of course, we talked about resiliency earlier. That's going to happen in every project we do from now on. How do we change direction if we need to? And how do we make sure that our people are going along the journey with us?
DJ, yeah, I love that response. And just to add on to it, I would say that when you're approaching an organization through change, I think one thing to do, regardless of what the change is really understand where you can maybe take something away. It's really difficult to ask people to change or do something new or different when they're already overwhelmed. And so thinking about strategically, how can you take something off their plate? How can you change processes in a way that allow them to, move quicker or move faster, where you're not saying, okay, everyone, we're going to add something new and this is the new thing, we're going to change, and you're like, and most people are going to be like, another thing that's on my plate. Now you are asking me to do interviews and, tell you all my thoughts. So I think that just from a strategic standpoint of change management is, what can we relieve them of first, make space for the change. And then the other thing is really understanding the capacity for change of your audience. And so what that means is, are they ready to change right now? It might be too early. You really have to understand, like, what is the mindset? And that has a lot to do with, knowing your people really well, building that relationship, and it could be even organizational engagement surveys, and making sure that they're in the mindset and ready for change. And that really has to do with, like, are people not really seeing the vision? Do we need to get them hyped up? Do we need to clarify that vision first and then move into something else? And so making sure you understand, how to approach change before actually making that impact, I think, is really important.
100%. What role does emotional intelligence play in a future-ready leadership, and how can leaders develop it?
I guess I can go with that one. But I do want to give everyone else a chance to talk, so I'm not going to say too much. But I think ensuring that there is emotional intelligence at the management level. So any manager, any people leader who understands or maybe needs training or coaching around emotional intelligence, I think, is super critical. Obviously, there has to be emotional intelligence at the top, but making sure that your management 101 training has some sort of emotional intelligence and understanding how to really pick up key things from your team and the people that you manage. I think that goes throughout the entire organization, and that would be kind of where my thought would go first.
Yeah, I'm going to echo that. The number one thing when I'm dealing with a new leader is I ask them how often they ask for feedback. And what are they doing about that? And if you have somebody who is uncomfortable asking for feedback, or who doesn't know how to process it without getting kind of insecure or being sarcastic or brushing it off or trying to make light of it, it can be really difficult for them to truly connect with their teams. So unpacking whatever that boundary of that barrier is to being vulnerable and comfortable with truly receiving the feedback from their leader as well as the people on their team is really important when it comes to their emotional intelligence and being truly ready to be that leader.
Such great points, both of you too. I just want to add one more thing in addition. So I often work with a lot of leaders who are resistant to spending a lot of time and focus on emotional intelligence. I come in and I'll run manager training programs, and a lot of them will say, oh, I hear that some of this is going to be on emotional intelligence. Why do we need to learn this? And the one thing that I love to cite is there's a study that was done by Carnegie Mellon, and they studied the Fortune 500 CEOs. And when they did this study, what they found was 75% of long-term success is determined by people skills, our emotional intelligence. Only 25% of our success is determined by our technical knowledge or our technical expertise. And yet so many people are promoted because of their technical knowledge and technical expertise. So we've actually over-invested on the technical knowledge and expertise of a lot of leaders and under-invested on these more human-centric skills that we actually are going to need more and more of, because AI is already taking over coding and a lot of the technical skills. While we still are going to need to upskill on how are we currently using the systems, we're going to need more and more these skills of how do I actually give great feedback? How do I actually have a conversation and build a relationship that I can inspire, influence, and motivate my team to get the best work done? And that's really important.
For me, when I hire leaders or when I inherit leaders, I share with them that it's a duality to the role. And if you think of it as a duality, there's a part of your job that, yes, you are responsible for results and moving the business forward and bringing in the innovation and bringing in the creativity. But you're also responsible for the health, psychological safety, and well-being of the people who are supporting you in doing that. And the only way you can do that is to accept that. And there are a lot of leaders that are not comfortable with that, going back to the earlier point. And sometimes we have to do the work to help them be comfortable. But it's also explaining to them that this is how you get the work done. Like, it's really and truly how you get the work done. People do business with people that they know. People work harder for people who they feel that they're invested in them. So it's explaining to them how it can make their leadership easier, how it can make the team dynamics on their team better, and sitting with them in the space. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm in healthcare. Most of my leaders go to school to be doctors and nurses. They do not go to school to be people leaders. That's not a part of what they study. And so having to share with them and say, hey, yes, you set the arm in the ED to send them to the specialist, but you cannot do that with your teams. You can't set your teams and send them to HR. You have to own a piece of this. And this is what ownership looks like. What would you want it to look like for you? So I think understanding your industry and understanding how that emotional intelligence sits at the crux of your industry, because they are trained to do it very well with patients, but not so good with each other. So it's helping them understand how to translate that piece of their job across all of what they do, and then pointing out and rewarding them when it does and goes well, and helping them recognize and become more comfortable with that.
I think that if leaders are not willing to upskill or learn emotional intelligence, you're really putting your entire team at risk, big time. Okay, taking a look at the next questions we have. How should business leaders leverage AI and emerging technologies to enhance human potential rather than replace it?
Well, I feel like I mentioned it earlier, but really leveraging AI like a colleague, someone that you can rely on or communicate with or collaborate with, I think is where you're going to leverage the most productivity.
Anyone else?
So there's a lot of ways in which we can use AI. It really depends on what industry you're in and how you're using it. So that it can really span the gamut. But a lot of the ways, a lot of people right now are using mostly large language models, which is like ChatGPT, Claude. And the way that we can often use that is to be a first pass, a first thing to start to accelerate things, but have humans always checking on it and reviewing it. So humans should be the initial, if we're building, agents, which is really going to be 2025 is going to be the year of AI agents by far. So if we're building agents, we need humans at the forefront deciding what the system instructions are and what's going to actually be a good system. What's it going to look like? So, say we're building a model that will describe our HR handbook, and we're building a model internally. How do we want it to communicate with our employees? What do we want it to speak like? So we're designing the instructions. We're thinking about that, keeping that human touch in mind and what's ethical, what's morality. And then on the back end, we're also reviewing what outputs are being put out by these machines and making sure that they're good, quality, ethical, and in line with what we want them to be. So I think of it as an accelerator, something that you can use in tandem with. I love what Felicia was saying. It's really a collaborator. It's not doing all the work on its own yet. It's not going to be. We need humans to be at the front end and the back end of it.
Let's see here. How can organizations create leadership development programs that align with the demands of the future workplace?
As we were talking about emotional intelligence just a little while ago, it brought me back to something Felicia had said earlier in our discussion, and that is, are we measuring the right things when it comes to performance management? When you look at most performance evaluations, they're goal-driven or results-driven, and oftentimes we're not measuring how the person achieved that result or that goal, but really whether the goal was achieved or not. And so I think a competency-based platform where we're really focusing on emotional intelligence, adaptability, resiliency, has to really kind of equal out on that performance management so that we can begin to reinforce and recognize and reward those behaviors that help us build those long-term strategies and hit our goals.
Yeah, DJ, and thanks for that. And it's just something that I wanted to share, which was you should always be refreshing your performance management strategy. I think that companies get stuck when they go through a big rigmarole around redesigning their performance management tool or their strategy, and then they just let it sit and go through autopilot. This doesn't make sense. And I'll tell you why. Because when an organization, especially in this age, is transforming, adapting, moving, changing, pivoting, your colleagues or your employees, you cannot always be able to reward the same behaviors and competencies when the organization is shifting. So this revisiting, this refreshing, it could be every 6 months, it could be every year, but as the organization grows and starts to shift and pivot, your people need to do the same with their behaviors. You know, what is really important for founders and their businesses at, you know, the Series A stage or at 10 people or at 20 people is going to look very different when they're at 100 people or 1,000 people. Very, very different. And so it's really critical that you have living, breathing, digital, emotional changes of your processes and your programs, and kind of that keeps the pace of the rhythm of the business.
What are some practical ways leaders can ensure that employees remain engaged and motivated amidst these rapid changes?
I'll take that one. It's understanding what motivates them and what they value most. I think oftentimes we run off with the performance management, which I completely agree. I think that's all great, but that's not the only measure. So it's asking them what matters most to you. How do you want to be recognized? And sometimes you can't do that across the entire spectrum. So you can use different tools like OC Tanner and others, and that way it's a bit more of a personalized approach. But it's helping people understand, again, how are they connected to the business and how does the business matter to them? Is it reward? Not everyone wants to be recognized the same. Some people it's monetary, some people it's promotions, other people it's development. So it's understanding what is that for the culture of your organization and how are you all specializing in that for the organization, and what does that look like? If you have multiple locations, maybe each location has something that's different. And then it's encouraging the leaders to also ask the same questions. I ask my team every year, what motivates you? What motivates you? When you are stuck in a rut and you can't get out, what do you need from me to help you get out? What can I give you? Is there a keyword? Is there an activity? Is there something? Because that personalized touch is what keeps people grounded in the work that we do.
100%. Does anyone have any other practical ways leaders can ensure that employees remain engaged and motivated?
We need to make sure that we're staying in communication with people and that we're setting expectations and then following through. The easiest way that you can build trust or completely erode trust is by setting an expectation, saying you're going to do something, and then either following through on it and creating that trust, or getting distracted by something else, and now all of a sudden this project is not the focus anymore, and there's been no communication of that. And so now when you're ready to share something new, some new initiative that you really feel strongly about and passionately about, you're not going to get that same buy-in. You're not going to get that same attention that you got and engagement that you got before, because you've already proven that you're not going to follow through on what you said.
How can HR maintain the balance of building a future-ready workforce while addressing the present realities of life and workplace well-being? Adrina, do you want to take a stab at that one?
Thank you. I sure will. It's acknowledging that there is a balance. You know, we live in an environment where people are carrying more and more into work. They're coming into work. The lines between work and home are being blurred. We have hybrid, we have remote. We have people who go through things before they come to work. I often think about what we do in healthcare. I have doctors who may have gotten a traffic ticket on the way to come and perform a surgery. So it's helping people understand that all of you comes to work. And as an organization where we may not be all responsible for all of you, we have to acknowledge all of you. We have to acknowledge that you have other things happening outside of work that may be hindering your lack of adaptability to our culture or to our innovation and to our creativity. So I think having programs like an EFAP or a LYRA or some type of other family assistance, or encouraging executive coaches, counseling, helping people understand that just like they have to perform at work, we are invested in helping them being balanced so they can perform. And I think sometimes if we help acknowledge that and free people from that and say, you know what, I see all of you. And I know right now that life is tough, but you're still showing up. How can we help? And I think as HR, we can lead the way in having that conversation up with our senior leaders, lateral with our peers, and downward with our teams. We don't necessarily have to drive it, but we can definitely influence it.
Just asking, how can I help? Right? Well, guys, this has been a great discussion. We are on top of the hour here, so we're going to have to wrap up our convo. But thank you all so very much for participating today. Thank you to our community listening from all over the world. And the next panel, starting just a few moments, is called Building a Resilient Workforce, Strategies for Adaptability and Growth. So stay tuned. Thank you, everyone. Bye, guys.
Good morning, afternoon, evening, nighttime, wherever you are. I'm so glad to be here today with you. I'm Lauren Lefkowitz, and I'll be moderating today's final panel during the People and Culture Strategy Summit. Our topic now is building a resilient workforce, strategies for adaptability and growth. Without any further introduction, I'd love to bring the panelists on the screen with us and start some introductions. Amazing. So panelists, if you could, keep your mics on mute when you're not speaking. It helps reduce the echo. And I'm going to ask you to tell us who you are. And apologies in advance if I mispronounce your name. Please do correct me. But we're going to ask who you are, what you do, and why this topic is interesting to you. So let's start with Ruchita.
Good afternoon from New Jersey. It's cold and I moved to statesides 5 years back. So snowstorms are still an experience I enjoy versus cringe. From Lauren, I'm often asked, it is Ru before Cheetah. So that's Ruchita. That's how the name is pronounced. You were almost there. I think from a topic perspective, what interested me, I was looking at the 3 days topics, and I think a lot of questions got answered and a lot of new questions came up, and it's a logical culmination as a topic. I actually quite enjoyed, listening to some of the sessions and bringing it here. So I'm actually looking forward to having an interesting discussion with our audience. The chat has been fantastic.
Thank you so much, Ruchita. Thank you. And Courtney next.
Hi, from Toronto. My name is Courtney, and I'm the VP of People at a company called Redstone here in Toronto. I would say that I'm primarily interested in this topic because change is one of the only things that we can count on for certain. And you need resilience to be able to adapt to change, and organizations need to foster resilience in order for that organization to continue to grow and learn. So that's why this topic was so impactful and important to me, and I'm really excited to join this panel today.
Thank you so much. Steve, over to you.
Hi there. Hello from St. Louis. And let's see, I was the CHRO for Purina, which is a part of Nestle. I had a long run there for about 20 years and recently retired. And I'm doing some nonprofit board work and some advisory work now. But I saw this topic and I felt like I lived it for probably the last 3 years that I was the head of HR at Purina. So I can share some of those lessons and look forward to it. Good to meet all of you and good to be with you.
Thank you, Steve. And Elizabeth.
Good evening, everyone. I am dialing in from Lagos, Nigeria. So I'm happy to be here. I have been sort of heading HR, people, and culture across different industries in Nigeria for the last 20 years, I think. And now I run my company called TGL Labs. I also serve on some boards and do some advisory work at the same time. Now, why this topic? Well, I think, like Courtney said, we're living in times of constant change. It's even less of a cliche than it ever was. And it's important for people to have the tools and the mindset to navigate change constantly, proactively, and healthily. So that's why I was interested.
Terrific. Thank you. Oh, I think we're going to have such a great discussion. Panelists, I'm going to give each of you an opportunity to answer the question as I put it out there. And if you just want to pop in, come off mute, pay attention to each other's mute buttons. Oh, great. And Cindy, you have just joined us as well. If you want to come off mute, introduce yourself, tell us who you are, where you work, and why this subject is important to you.
Hi, my name is Cindy. I am the HR manager right now for a company in aerospace and defense. And the reason why this topic is important to me is because I don't think there is a whole lot out there right now when it comes down to this broad topic, right? So I think making it more of an awareness topic, and trying to find the right tips and tricks to it is essential.
Terrific. Thank you. Glad you're here. So as I was saying, just come off mute when you want to answer the question. Everybody will have an opportunity to participate, and we'll also pay attention to the comments that are coming through the live stream, because I love it when we get comments, questions from our audience. So please, if you're with us in the audience, please feel free to kick in with your thoughts. So our first question is, it's sort of a two-part opposites question, which is, how do you define a resilient workforce? What is it? And what is it not?
I'm happy to jump in first. I'll be quick. The word that comes to mind for me, and we had been working on this a little bit in the late teens, was agility. So a resilient workforce is agile. It can react to unexpected things that happen. It doesn't get bogged down in routine. It doesn't embrace the past and say, this is how we've always done it. Things hit, things happen, and they can deal with it, for lack of a better word. That'd be my first 2 cents. Thanks.
I can go next. So if you look at the word resilient in dictionary, like what's the literal meaning of it? It basically says willingness to come out of or improve from a difficult situation and adapt to it. So, which is, if I have to summarize, is bouncing back. But what happens in the organization context is it is bouncing forward. The time is moving. So when you're being resilient, you're actually not going to get caught in that spot. You will be resilient and you will actually be able to work with that. So it's a little more about future forward approach. And I love Steve's answer because he kind of covered different things. For me, it is very simple, without getting into jargons. You close your eyes. I'm sure all of us have some dream teams in our career where we just loved it. We couldn't wait to reach office. We couldn't wait to do the new challenge. And people said, you guys are crazy. What are you doing? How will you do this? And you did it. And then you went and you had your share of failures, but you went out to celebrate. So, when you look at those dream teams, think about what was there. You had skill sets, but you were not defined by boundaries. You stepped in for each other and you helped each other. I think resilience is a lot about co-ownership. It's not just one person or the leader who needs to own it, but everybody owns it together. That's very important. The third thing in my mind is the emotional stamina of going through it. So when you're going through a lot of change, and there is a lot I want to say around change, when Courtney stated that, I think that stamina is very important because you will not get all things right. And for you to come out of it without judgment and adapt to the situation, like you did it wrong, now I'm going to correct it. Now we're going to just pivot and just fix it. So to me, it's very simplified. You'll just feel good here. You'll feel very good about being in a dream team.
If I can add on to that. Oh, sorry, Elizabeth, do you want to go? Okay. If I can add on to that, I think that when I join an organization and I'm trying to test how resilient that organization is, which of course I'm sure all of us have been there, where you get in and you're trying to figure out, all right, if I need to make some waves and make some changes, how resilient is this team going to be? I first look for failure. I first look and see how safe people feel to fail and what that failure looks like. And that always is an initial indicator to me as to how resilient that workplace is going to be. I've definitely entered organizations where I looked around and everybody was so scared to make the next move, or everybody was so scared to innovate because they were scared of failure. And in those organizations, I inherently knew that change was going to be difficult and that innovating was going to be difficult because we didn't have this parameter of safe failure.
Absolutely. Thanks, Courtney. So I was just going to say, for me, a resilient team looks like a team that gets better with challenges. So each time, and when I talk or think about this, I always try to picture a tree, that's maybe been in rough weather. Could be a fire or could be, icy cold. And what happens after that? Does it get its leaves back? Does it become brittle? Does it become a better tree? Do we get fruit from it? So when I think of of a team that's resilient and what doesn't look like is a team that gets better with the failure, there's psychological safety, there is a shared purpose, like what Ruchita said, there's agility, you bounce forward, you're moving forward and no looking in the rearview mirror. But what it's not, and what sometimes we tend to think resilience would look like, is even in the challenge and you need to pivot, because a resilient team should be able to pivot, like in your shared purpose, switch and be better. But sometimes it looks like even in that pivot, then when people fall off the way, there are casualties. So you lose some of that shared purpose, some of that trust. You lose some of the teaming. Some people feel like, okay, yeah, well, I guess this wasn't for me, or they're burnt, or something like that. So resilience doesn't have that.
I will just add the words against all odds. That's how I would best describe a resilient workforce, against all odds.
Can I add something just really quickly, like onto Elizabeth's point? I just wanted to add that I'm sure that everybody watching this and this panel, something that comes to my table a lot is that resilience is like toxic positivity. Like, oh, I'm going to push on, I'm just going to smile no matter what. And I'm like, that's not resilience. It's the actual ability to overcome whatever it had happened. And I know with my teams and with people that I've worked with before, there's like this mix of, there's a conflation of the two, like this toxic positivity. Oh, resilience means I'll just smile and ignore everything bad that's happening. And it's just such an ability, to Elizabeth's awesome point, it's such an ability to like actually overcome and triumph over whatever is happening. I just wanted to add that in there.
Beautiful. So now that we know what resilience is and a little bit about what it's not, what role does leadership play? So we were talking to HR leaders out here, or people who are positioning themselves to be HR leaders. What role does leadership play in creating a culture of adaptability and resilience, especially during times of crisis or change?
I can go first. And, you made a very good point, Courtney. Endurance and grit is not resilience. And the tough it up used to be maybe, 1970s mantra, but now I think it's more about how are you adapting and bringing more agility to the page. So right there, Lauren, I think the answer starts with is the leader needs to model it. Something I've always liked to say is you can do anything as a team, but you can't do everything. So, and that's where the distance of, the resilience comes. A couple of things which I have felt, it's very easy to say, empower your team, embed it in the culture, but the devil lies in the details of what is happening there. So if you just, you do need to bring a lot of clarity to your team, what needs to be done, what success looks like. But it doesn't mean you pass the whole pressure you're getting from the top down to the team. That's not transparency. That's just like you're not really raising your hand to help, or you're not helping them work on it. The other thing which is you have to model yourself being resilient, which all the traits we talked about in terms of emotional security, asking for help, reaching out to whosoever can help it versus having boundaries. You have to show that safety and that comfort, which can be psychological safety, back to what Elizabeth said, but it has many other elements of change to it. The third thing is burnout. So from a leader's perspective, and that's where the endurance grit part comes in, is the leaders themselves have to model. And some countries do it, some geographies do it better culturally than some others. But if you are not showing, okay, let's take a break, or we can't keep stretching the band because it'll break at some point. If I do not stop, then my team assumes that others also have to continue, or that's an expectation. So you have to normalize recovery. Recovery is very important. Nobody can do this on a continued basis. And we can talk more about wellness and wellness strategies, but that is a very critical part of your performance strategy for a leader.
Hey, I'll just piggyback on that. I think Ruchita pretty much nailed it, but I'd say a quote that comes to mind is from Marshall Goldsmith. He wrote that great book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. There's one he comes back to all the time for leaders, is that it's showtime. So anytime you walk into work, people are just obsessing about you and what you're doing and how you're doing it. So if you're the one running around with your hair on fire and losing it, you can pretty much guarantee that's going to happen with the rest of your team. And then I just say it's also your responsibility to coach it, the resilience in others. So if people are panicking and coming to you and overreacting to things, or you see them overreacting to things, you've got a responsibility, not just to scream calm down at them or get annoyed with them, but to ask the right questions. Is that working? Is this working for you? Is this helpful? What else can we do? Can we look at this another way? And sort of bring them along in a different direction that way.
Sorry, Elizabeth, you and I we're in tandem. I will go quickly. I think there's so much that's already been said that is absolutely hit the nail on the head. The two things that jumped out to me that I wrote down when I saw the question is just around a two sort of prong approach: support and then safe failure. And to me, that's how a leader could foster resilience. And support, obviously, sometimes we conflate that with the one side of support, which is I'm here for you, I'm there for you. But as Steve was saying, it's also a coaching into how can I coach you to be more resilient? How can I, and that ties into the safe failure part. How can I let you fail in this? And then how can I help you bounce back from that failure, protecting and keeping those failures safe so that they're not detrimental to the business or whatever. But I think ultimately it comes to that. And when I think about even on the personal side or on a human perspective, if you have a trauma in your life, or if you have an incident in your life and you have no support, that's where trauma comes from. But if you have an incident and you have support, that's where resilience comes from. And so I think that does translate over to our teams. And I think that that's a big piece as to how we can foster that.
Oh, I really like what you said. When you don't have support is when trauma sets in. Ooh. And I was going to piggyback off what Steve said. When they come to you in the crisis, sometimes they don't even come to you. Sometimes they're scrambling. They're just trying to solve or their own individual type of response that might not be healthy. So I think the leader's responsibility, in addition to modeling it, is to actively lead, conscious leading. You have to have your pulse and just be on the lookout for some of these types of learned behaviors that don't help for resilience among the people. And then there's communication, because nobody knows what you're thinking. If everyone could read everyone's mind, we'll be scared. So just assume that they don't know what's in your mind and speak, communicate, use the right words, model the calmness that you seek. I usually like to imagine to myself that the resilience, whatever you think you deserve, do it first. So as a leader, do it first.
I think they have pretty much all added some really good points. I don't think there's a whole lot that I could add to that already, just because of the fact that everything has pretty much been said. What I was going to say was pretty much, be that role model for them. Stay cool, calm, and collected, even if inside you're screaming just like they are. I think that would be more just what I was going to stick to along those lines, but it was already said. So.
And have a child or a pet leaning against you, I say. I'm so glad to see your
4-year-old over here.
4-year-old in the side of the screen. I think there is something so lovely about being able to work from a place where, whether it's home or the office, where you can find comfortable spots and comfort items and comfort people or animals in your space to do with you through the day. So we know from our conversation so far that resilience isn't endurance. It's not do it anyway. It's not screaming at people to get it done. So if you're a leader in a workforce and you are trying to build resilience, if you are trying to help foster resilience for growth in your organization, what are some practical ways to build and sustain resilience over the long term, especially in a world where there's just change around us all the time?
Sure, I'll hop in. I love the concept of growth mindset. You've all probably read about that. There's books written about it. It had a big, I think it was booming like 10 or 15 years ago, like in sports in the United States with coaches in high schools and college talking about this. It's basically, I'm going to try real hard to learn something. If it's hard, I'm not going to let it defeat me. I'm going to stay with it. I'm going to put the extra work in, even if it's not fun. I'm going to get something out of it, and I'll stay with it until I can master something about it. And I'm going to get used to doing that throughout my career. And I think that's a concept we tried to start building actually in the recruiting process, then in the onboarding process in my old job, and trying to thread it through the organization. It gets a little harder with your established employees. And the longer you're in especially a big organization, you start to think about things like job descriptions and org charts like they were written in stone. One of my old bosses used to say, we're going to keep the organization on wheels, and we're going to tweak it and change it and adjust it all the time. And that people don't like that because they get used to the way things are. But the more you can start to drive that principle throughout the organization as an expectation, I think it's very healthy to do it. Easier said than done, too.
I will also add on to that I recently went through the ProSci practitioner program, and this is not a plug for ProSci, but I did not realize, I thought that I was really good at change management until I went through this program. I was like, I have not been doing change management right at all. Like I realized how often I didn't do all of the foundational building of like why this change is happening, how we're going to protect you throughout this change, where you can fail within this change and where you can't. And ever since doing this program, I'm like, oh, wow. As I look at that, I look at other changes I've done that have failed, or other teams that I've been at the helm of that they weren't super resilient. I couldn't really figure out why. And when I really like self-reflected on that, I'm like, wow, I was just plowing through change nonstop, not really thinking about it. And they weren't resilient. And I'm like, why aren't they resilient? And it's because I didn't do any of the foundational pieces of like true change management. So just also adding, change management is such a practical, in its entirety, it's like such a practical item. Do this, do that, do this. And I think that's a really big piece of building a resilient team.
I'll just add to that, and thank you for sharing that story, Courtney. Back to Steve's point, and I think somebody in the chat also referred to it, is for me, practical tips come out of sports team. I think they are the ones who possibly historically have shown resilience. You can have skill, you can be a great player, but you don't know, are you going to play on a mud ground, you're going to play on a grass ground, you're going to be on a rainy weather, or you're not at home turf. So you adapt to the situation and you learn how you're going to build that agility or how you're going to condition yourself. I think that's very important. So just saying that I'm an expert of ABC, like Courtney, you talked about change management. We have all done sitting here. I'm sure people who are listening to us have done it, but really understanding, are you ready for different elements, different kind of people, and working through it? So continuous learning, skilling plus conditioning is very critical in my mind. Second piece is performance metrics. When we are looking at it, if you're constantly going to award, the skill part, I was listening to one of the sessions earlier, and we were talking about the expertise is awarded more than the right behavior is where it is very important. So your performance metrics needs to have collaboration, adaptability, agility as part of it, and it needs to be assessed and awarded. So, and even higher, that's Steve, I think you were referring to when you're talking about working through that. And again and again, I would talk about practical work, focus on recovery. Change is not going to slow down. I don't know if you think this is too much change and we have fatigue, it's only going to increase more because you're feeling it also because the pace of technology is changing so much. If you're going to run next to a car, you are going to feel, you can't match that race. So you have to find a car for yourself, or you have to figure out how you're going to bring that speed. And till then, you have to have a very strong strategy on how you're going to recover from your fatigue, work through that. So some of those things I would just add to what has already been said.
Okay, I wanted to see if Sandy wanted to go first. I just have this to say because everyone sounds so erudite, and I will say something very simple. You become what you practice. Yeah. So if you want to be resilient, practice it. And it's everything that we're talking about. And it involves a whole dose of the growth mindset. Learn something new. Put yourself, or organizations help your people put themselves in positions where they are growing. And that place of growth has it's not always nice and sweet. It sometimes there's the testing. You want people to be flexible so that they don't tear. And when you put in your 10K hours, or the 70% of your learning into being resilient, you go look for things that stretch you. And when you have practice, then you are not brittle. So I'll just say, just put in the practice.
I'll read the comment that that we found interesting out there. And it says, change needs agility. Failure demands resilience. They are different things. No. Sorry, I was trying to close my little comment screen over here. So I don't know what you guys think, but I mean, I do think that there is a difference. Sorry. I do think that there is a difference to it. Give me a second. I'm sorry.
Okay, we'll move on to the next question, unless anybody else wants to comment on the comment that Cindy just read aloud for us. Okay, great. And thank you for your comments. I think there's such a good discussion going on in the comment section. So we've talked a lot of broad scope, how things are, what we know, what we can identify. Let's get practical. So if you are, if somebody is in our audience today, or a bunch of somebodies are in our audience today, and they are joining an organization or have just joined an organization or got promoted within an organization where now they have the ability to impact resilience of the organization and the growth of the organization, and they see that the organization they are in does not demonstrate resilience. There's chaos, there's poor planning, there's a lot of infighting. What advice would you give to begin fostering resilience within organizations?
I'm happy to start. I would start at the top, and I would start with the leadership team. I would start by inherently, if I felt so empowered or strong enough to coach them on resilience, then I would do so. Or if I could find an expert that could help to coach them on resilience, because it is a learned behavior just like anything else. And many leaders that I have encountered across my career don't have resilience. So it's really hard for them to foster on their team's resilience. I also think, depending on the locus of control that you have in your organization, I will add that the most resilient teams, generally speaking, and in my experience, are diverse teams. So I would also begin by initiatives that aim to increase diversity in the team to make sure that I have that inherent staff body that can be resilient and that can bounce back. But I would first start with coaching my leadership team, training my leadership team on change management, making sure that they understand the components of change management. And then when those two things are together, I think that they will be able to permeate deeper into the organization. But it has to start at the top, because otherwise people look at their leaders and they go, well, you're running around and you're confused. And when something happens, you take 3 days off because you're upset that it happened and you're anxious and all these other things. And it just permeates down across the organization. So I think that it really starts all the way at the top.
I'll just add one thing to that. You're absolutely right, Courtney. It's so critical for the leadership to be there. The fact that the culture is not there, I'm not sure if the issue is they lack coaching or they lack the intent or there is a fundamental something broken somewhere. And being in HR, it's hard when you're looking at it because you do have a job of aligning it to the business imperatives and business vision, but you also are sort of the last line of defense for your employees. So you sit in the middle to try and bring it together. I do believe that, look, I mean, it's a call you have to take at what decision is it, can you facilitate change of leadership? Can you facilitate coaching, back to what you just said? But I also think there is a case for bringing ripple effects. So if you can't do it really at the top, you can start identifying corners where you can, you can somehow isolate it to say, okay, let's start and build these ripple corners, which will spread the goodness. So sometimes, it is not always need to be start from the top, because what happens is, let's say I'm a 10 years experience middle level HR person, if I'm listening to this, it's like, okay, so there's nothing I can do, so I'll have to just wait or change my job. But you can do something to build in your team and build your own corner, which helps you understand and learn to go through it. The world is not nice. The world is not often resilient or is going to work in the structured fashion as we are working. So you have to learn how you are going to be resilient and create your own dream teams within maybe not a very nice place. That is a possibility, while I will not absolutely undermine the importance of leaders working with the right resilient culture.
I'd add to that to say that, yes, even if the leaders are actually really important because they can scale whatever it is, whatever culture, they have the power of scale, of direction that can scale, but then involving the people early. So this is somewhat a bridge between Courtney and Ruchita's point, which is, if you can create that awareness when you join the organization and that's your role, just have some plan to drive the awareness that resilience is needed, and then maybe people want it. So the ADKAR framework, awareness, then desire, then you can teach people about it. Yeah, you go to knowledge and all of that. But that awareness, if you can scale that, either you use champions, people that you see, if you create pockets of it, run some experiments, but just try to transfer the awareness that resilience is a business leverage. And then you'll see how people might transform and take it up and be your champions as well.
The one thing I would say is the people that you want to utilize, I would say pick the ones that you know or you see that are influential, because even in different departments, lower departments, let's say in production, right? There is some of those individuals that are followed, that are looked at as leaders, even if they don't have a supervisor role or a lead role. So just utilize those individuals to help you spread that resilience, to spread those, those examples, to spread those ideas, to spread those seeds.
Just thing I'd add is it's got to start on your own team, especially for an HR person. So if you've got the non-resilient team and you're trying to drive resilience in the company, that's going to be a tough chore. So your own team's a great place to start. I think it's been said too.
I'm hearing such good input on, starting with you, starting with your team, starting with influential people in the organization. And I've heard each of you at one point or another use a term or a similar term to practice. And one of the best things I ever heard was, it's a practice, not a perfect. Everything we do, practice. We are trying things, we are seeing what works, we are thinking about pulling things down that don't work and trying different things and reaching out to different allies within our organization. And so such a great discussion so far. Looking ahead, as we look to the next 5 years or 10 years, What do you think will be the biggest challenges and opportunities for organizations in building workforce resilience?
I'll jump in. I think it's the pace. Rashida said that earlier. It's not going to get easier. It's just going to go faster and faster. And the responsibility we've all got is to be leaning into it and learning about what's about to hit us. The most obvious example is AI. You can sit there and complain about it. You can sit there and worry about losing your job. You can join those discussions, or you can learn as much about it as you possibly can and be a curator of AI for your own function or your own part of a function, and embrace it and become an expert at it. But to hope it goes away is not going to work. We know that. And I'd say that the art of it is to apply that attitude to everything about the environment and the work that you're confronted with, and just expect it to change constantly.
I'll just add 2 things to that. Look, in my head, when I visualize a meeting, the biggest challenge I see it is in the room, there is 5 generations sitting together. The drivers of what they think, what they want, what is their motivator, how they want to progress, what success looks like to them, everything is different. And when we are trying to, plow through it and work through it, sometimes we say we are listening, we are talking to you, but we are not really listening. We try to close, we try to snap off the voice, which is disagreeing. Dissent or resistance to change actually can really help you with your blind spots. You don't want a disengaged employee on your team not going anywhere and not saying anything. So I think the challenge is, what are you doing about listening to the variety and variation sitting on your table, and how you're consolidating and working on it? I mean, AI, of course, Steve has already touched, so I'll not talk about it. Listening is going to be very critical, and how we are bringing that, channeling that into the continuous learning is going to be super critical. I have said it, I'm sounding like a motor there, is you do have to have a good, strong wellness strategy, recovery from the fatigue, because change is not going to slow down. I have said this multiple times to my teams, my businesses: stop saying this will happen, then we will do it. Life is not linear. It doesn't run in series.
Yeah, thanks, Rachita. I wanted to just add, it's uncertain. We're even having just modifications to the VUCA statements where there are 3Ds or 4Ds or whatever. But what everybody knows is that it's uncertain. You don't know what the change will be. You don't know what's the next DeepSeek that's coming out tomorrow. And then, it just disrupts everything. So I think what we will need more of now are leaders that are adaptive. So for organizations to invest in those leaders, you identify the people, or the champions, the people that it comes maybe a little bit more naturally to them than the other people. But this means you have to be consciously leading. You have to have your pulse. You have to seek these people out. You have to give them the opportunity to practice, and then support them and create them as leverage for your business. So I think it's the managing the global uncertainty with adaptive. We need leaders that can bounce forward and teach people how to bounce forward.
Wow, so true. How do I follow all of those? I think that of course all amazing points made, and I completely align. The only other thing that I think I could possibly add is just that not organizationally, like worldwide, we're so change saturated. So I find that that's a big challenge for when I come into organizations and I'm trying to make like a big wave. We're so exhausted as a society with change that even externally, it's hard to find that even external resilience that we may have had in a pre-COVID time, or we may have been stronger in a pre-COVID time. Now we had this radical change and people are just, they're done. And I think that to Rashida's point, it's wellness programs, things that help to foster that internal wellness, and those internal feelings will help to maybe not completely eliminate, but mitigate how stressed out that people are feeling about just the global climate in general and the economy and politics and all the other things that cloud our ability to feel resilient. Because even I consider myself a pretty resilient person, but I look at the news and I don't feel so resilient these days. So I think that that's a big piece of it.
Okay, our final question. I can't believe we're already at our final question. Time goes so fast. I'm going to ask each of you to share a resource, a book, a course, something that you have found helpful that either helped you develop resilience personally or that helped you help your organization develop resilience.
I have this one. I'm not promoting, but this has been a life-changing book for me. It's Chris Hurst is the writer, and it's No BS Change. It's been amazing. It was given to me as a birthday present by my team. I think it was 2 birthdays ago, and I've read it like 4 times, like just over and over. Well, maybe 8 times, but yeah, 4 times.
I've been thinking of buying that one, so now I'll do that a little bit. I think 2 things I'll say there is, one is the book I loved and swear by is Innovator's Dilemma. It was written way back, but I think the take it has on innovation and understanding when it is not required innovation versus when it is, and how to understand and work through that dilemma has helped me understand the change versus constantly wanting to make the next headline. The other piece is, when you are a successful leader, or you're kind of ambitious, doing well, letting go of control is very difficult. So what I've found as resources, sometimes just get out of their way, empower them, tell them what's your North Star, tell them you're in a safe place, you are their safety line. You find people showing up in a much better fashion. So I would give credit to meditation. It had to do a lot of meditation, and I have to continue doing that, detoxifying, but it has helped me as a resource to deal with and give myself that rest I often recommend.
I've got a couple. One, I mentioned the concept of agility. We use the book Team of Teams. It's written by Stanley McChrystal. You can find it out there. Just Google it, Team of Teams. Really good job of helping a mature, stuffy, stiff, big, gigantic corporation get off its rear end and move faster. And that's that. The other is just an article you can Google as well. I'm a big fan of Dave Ulrich. He's written on this concept of managing paradox, which means 2 completely different things going on at the same time. And you as a leader have to explain why we have to deal with both of them, because the human mind is very binary, and they'll tell you, well, if you want us to save money, we can't innovate, or vice versa. And that's not the world we live in. So Managing Paradox by Dave Ulrich, you can Google that and I'm sure it'll pop right up. That'd be my 2 cents.
I'll speak super, super quickly. I know we're coming to a close, but just two of them that come to mind, of course, are some kind of change management program. Like, it really did change the way that I think about change. But in terms of a book that I love as it relates especially to safe failure and fostering teams that allow safe failure is Dare to Lead by Brené Brown. It's one of my favorite ones, and it has like amazing toolkits at the back that really help guide conversation. I mean, I could talk for probably like another hour about my favorite books, but knowing that we're wrapping that up, I would stick with those. I would stick with a change management program and Dare to Lead by Brené Brown.
Thank you all so much. And Cindy, I just saw you come off mute. Do you have one to add real quick? We don't have audio from Cindy. So if you see, if you have something to add, Cindy, please add it to the comments. Thank you to all of you panelists for being here. Such a pleasure, such a great conversation. I wish we could talk all day. For those of you who joined us, thank you for being here. I'm Lauren Lefkowitz, Executive Coach and Fractional Chief HR Officer. And this wraps up the People and Culture Strategy Summit. If you didn't get a chance to watch all of it and you're a member in Hacking HR, then you will be able to watch the replays. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you, Lauren. You were amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you.